And we're back. What happened? I think OBS fucked up. Uh, uh, right? Alright, Retro Gamer, what did you say? Huh? Why did the stream end? Yeah. Yeah, that's what I'm wondering. Should be back up. What the actual... Alright, I think we're back. Hello, everyone? Are we back now? Seriously hope so. Something happened with OBS. I have no idea what. Yes. Oh, thanks. Thank God. Okay, fine. That was weird. OBS just kind of shit the bed. I don't think we got even a minute into the video before it stopped, so let's just reset and do everything over again.
Skyrim is a game that I love.
This is reviewing Skyrim 13 years later, full story and DLCs by Owen Kung. It's an hour and 20 minutes. We need to get going because I have somewhere to be in 4 hours.
And not in some superficial way either. This game could get the pipe. When I first played Skyrim on my Xbox 360, I was completely blown away by the game's gorgeous presentation and the sheer amount of content it came with.
What gorgeous presentation. I said that the last time. Not sure if it actually was on stream. But yes, I don't think I can categorize anything in Skyrim as gorgeous. Maybe not like small parts of the game, but like in general, it's just bleak.
And Skyrim became a main part of my daily schedule for a few months. And as of now, I have over 530 hours of playtime clocked in on my Steam account from on and off playing throughout the years. And about half of that is probably mod troubleshooting. But I digress. Skyrim was unlike anything I'd ever played before. And thanks to this game is now permanently tied to my sad and pathetic life. In my opinion, Skyrim was one of the greatest examples of right place, right time. Which isn't a knock on the older games in the series and the fan bases they built up, but Skyrim's popularity still massively eclipses that of Oblivion and Morrowind. This was a game that not only fantasy and RPG fans were playing. This was a game that even your bum-ass normie classmate who never paid you back for a movie ticket was playing. And these are the types of people who exclusively played FIFA and Call of Duty. So any game that managed to pull in those type of gamers had some serious aura. Not only that, but this was at a time when open world games had yet to reach their peak, and the idea of a game with a fully persistent and detailed open world was still cutting edge and exciting, rather than a given at this point. And with GTA 5 still almost 2 years out from the fateful release date of 11/11/11, Skyrim was positioned to run a train on the gaming industry. And that it did. And as of writing this, Skyrim is sitting at a total of 60 million lifetime copies sold across all of its shameless re-releases of console ports and its special editions. And we're going on year 13 of waiting for Elder Scrolls 6. But Skyrim's staying power is so strong, we may be waiting for another 13 years until Todd is brave enough to reveal it.
Is it actually Skyrim's staying power that's prohibiting the release of the Elder Scrolls 6 though? I mean, maybe they just have no idea what to do. That's what I'm betting on, at least.
And to abandon his golden child. But in the meantime, I thought it'd be cool and fun to take a look at one of my favorite games ever and round out this modern Elder Scrolls review series. So let's rim the sky and jump right into our prisoner cart.
You can't say that.
Jumping into Skyrim, the first thing you'll notice is the game's presentation. And straight up, this game is gorgeous.
No.
Skyrim's world designers were cooking.
Okay.
Sauteing and creaming when they made this world. And it still looks fantastic even to this day. Everywhere you look, there are misty, jagged mountains towering over the landscapes, detailed forests, waterfalls.
Okay, maybe I'm biased because I actually live in this kind of landscape, but I don't know. It's it has a few flaws, to say it lightly.
Streams, groves, ravines, so on and on and on. And it all looks fantastic, especially with the special editions graphics updates, or if you use an ENB to HDR the shit out of your game. Skyrim's graphics have held up strong for over a decade, and sure, it isn't perfect. Some textures look pretty crispy, animations are still stiff and awkward as fuck.
I don't think you can use an actual bug as an example of animations looking crispy.
And the NPCs still aren't, fully there yet. But it's a genuine step up from Oblivion in every possible way. And I think the landscapes are just downright fantastic. And they have such an epic scale and cohesive design, I still think it looks better than most modern gaming landscapes and wildernesses. And this world design is perfectly complemented by the soundtrack, which is probably one of the greatest soundtracks in gaming history. Jeremy Soule dropped his nuts in the studio and delivered us his absolute opus with Skyrim soundtrack, which is easily the series' best soundtrack. Secunda, Streets of Whiterun, From Past to Present, Far Horizons, and I could go on. They're all heaters, and they give this game an immense aura that I've yet to see be replicated by another game. This soundtrack is so serene and ethereal, I have a story to tell about it. A few years ago, I was visiting a place called Bolt Castle in the Thousand Islands, and inside the castle, the speaker system was playing From Past to Present, which I immediately recognized from my hundreds of hours of playtime, and they were playing it just to make the place feel more grand and majestic. And that's how you know this soundtrack is just different. And the soundtrack, in combination with the world design, have really left an impression on fans of this game. Just take a look at the comments section of any Skyrim song to see how this game is able to create a feeling that no other game has really yet to replicate. And something about hearing one of those soundtracks while you're traveling, and you look up beyond the misty mountains to see Master and Secunda lording in the sky above you, it's just mwah, special. But
You probably won't be doing much traveling in Skyrim, though. Let's be real. But yes, it has a point. The soundtrack has potential to be, pretty great for exploring the world, but I don't know. It feels more like it has certain places where it just kind of clicks and then disappears into the background, and that's fine. But, well, I guess what you can say is it's just a good soundtrack that encompasses pretty much everything you do in the game. But I don't think it has to, specifically certain parts could probably have more like a targeted soundtrack, I guess. I don't know. I need to organize my thoughts on that.
But enough gushing about presentation. We have to go get our head lopped off by Imperial thugs for the crime of loitering. So once we arrive in Helgen after a bumpy ride...
Oh no, he's recording with this mouse pointer.
But it seems that Bethesda's been reading some Marxist theory, as Skyrim is a borderline classless society. When making your character, that's literally all you're doing. Building how your character looks. As classes, attributes, and signs have all been removed, marking a pretty huge step away from the series' established RPG mechanics. In Skyrim, the only thing that matters in character creation is your character's race, as each race offers different skill bonuses and a racial ability to start you out.
If only they actually showed you this. I mean, they didn't do this in Oblivion either. But they kind of provided like a small description of what you could maybe expect. But in Skyrim, it's like, I don't know. I was kind of caught by surprise by my Dunmer having that one ability, Ancestor's Fury or whatever. Also, first of all, it wasn't an Ancestor Guardian, which could summon a ghost. So that was disappointing. But yeah, I don't know. It just feels like, yet again, they're not managing to properly convey information to the player. And this goes even deeper than just the character select too. It's like prevalent throughout the entire game. And while you can't say that you just read the manual, I don't think that's a valid point for not including this information in game. If it's supposed to be as, what's it called? I forget the word, but if you're gonna actually feel like you're a part of the game, then that's kind of information you shouldn't not be specifically taught.
but beyond maybe some extra points added to a few skills to get you a bit of a head start, your character's race has never mattered less. And sure, you can still do a limited amount of build crafting, such as this Punch Kitty build, where you can use the Khajiit's Claws for 15 extra unarmed damage, and then take the Fist of Steel perk from Heavy Armor to further increase your unarmed damage based on the gauntlets you're wearing, and further pair it with the Gloves of the Pugilist or a similar enchantment for even more damage. But
I'm sorry. Khajiit can wear gloves and still get that unarmed bonus? That makes absolutely no sense.
this is about as complex as builds will get in this game. Instead of a raw numbers attribute system that you add points on level up, progression is now done through incremental perks, and with each level...
Actually, I should probably write that down. Can Khajiit get an armed bonus for claws when wearing gauntlets?
Level up, you unlock a perk point to spend, and you can spend your skill point on any skill tree, given you have a high enough level in said skill, and the perk you want is not blocked via progression through the tree's perks. Skill levels now exist wholly as a wall to lock perks behind, and leveling up skills now adds progress to a level bar that, when filled, allows you to level up, which no longer requires resting or sleeping in a bed to lock in your level up, and you can just level up right in the menu, which is nice, as it gives you complete control over when you want to lock in your level ups. But it also comes with the drawback of not being able to check your current skill levels, as you'll be forced to level up before browsing the skills menu if applicable. And when you do, you can either choose to level up health, magicka, or stamina by 10, which are some pretty meager buffs, and it'll take several levels before your raised health or magicka, or stamina, starts making a noticeable difference. This leveling system is a real mixed bag, as you probably know.
I don't think that's why it's a mixed bag, though.
As on one hand, it streamlines and keeps level progression tight and balanced, as you no longer have to worry about falling behind enemy level scaling and going from the hero of Kavach to the hero of Ass, because you forgot to level up Blade and Alchemy 10 times that level. And you can now actually, play the game normally, leveling up as the skills roll in, and the game's challenge will remain pretty fair and balanced. Although you'll still hit the occasional wall when you run into a Centurion whose steam breath can boil you from the inside out in under a few seconds, or run into a dungeon with only low-level bandits that you can slaughter in your sleep. But in general, the challenge is very consistent. But this streamlined system also dumbs down and really constricts player progression, and several perks boil down to boring incremental increases for attacks, spellcasting efficiency, armor rating, sneak chance, and so on and so forth. There are still a handful of perks that extend their skills in interesting ways, such as armor being weightless and worn, or being able to apply 2 enchantments on an item. But many of these helpful skills are locked behind other perks that you need to first unlock to gain access to the subsequent perks. So unless it's a skill you're heavily investing in, most of your perk upgrades will come in 20% increments. And it's a far cry from the days of Morrowind, where your attributes worked in tandem with your skills to increase your power. And although I wasn't the biggest fan of the 5x your attributes based on skill ups per level system, and I would personally lean more towards a uniform progression system, Skyrim's perk-based progression really removes the need to really plan out or think about how to best build a class. And it makes leveling up just a matter of picking the best currently available skill, and the most strategy you could really put into this system is waiting to level up so you can get your primary attack skills up to do a bit of power leveling to outpace the enemy scaling. But once you do go to level up, you have to lock in all your gain levels at once. And if you decide not to spend your perk point right away, you're just doing yourself a disservice. The world already got stronger around you when you locked in that level up, so there's a pretty limited amount of power leveling and gaming you can do in this system. Also, quick side note,
That's true.
athletics and acrobatics are gone, and your walk speed and jump height are fixed for the entire game. This is obviously some bull jive, and I wish we still had it.
It was probably removed to keep the player from jumping up to the back exits of caves and dungeons. That's probably why it was removed.
At least acrobatics, as it makes traversal more entertaining, and it wouldn't break the game that much. Well, probably not. But anyway, this tightened up level system isn't without purpose, as it exists to make the game fully accessible to all players, allowing them to go wherever they want, whenever they want. And the enemies they face will always be appropriately scaled to be a fair challenge. This is a world design philosophy
That's just not true.
that started in Oblivion, but thanks to that game's fuck-ass leveling system, it wasn't fully realized until Skyrim. And it gets the job done well enough for what it sets out to do. Like I mentioned earlier, just by playing normally, the combat always felt challenging enough, with a few spikes in difficulty here and there. but the scaling and balancing in this game is so fine-tuned, Skyrim suffers overall as a result, as the player feels like they haven't gotten all that more powerful from the start of the game. One of Morrowind's greatest aspects is its tangible and noticeable player progression. You start out as a complete scrub.
Oh my god, he's fucking using the Iron Dagger too. Jesus.
Whiffing swings, casting meager spells, and getting your ass eviscerated by a scamp in that cool Daedric Ruin you wanted to check out. Morrowind is a completely open world game, but it isn't completely open from the start. As outside of overworld enemies in dungeons have fixed stats and items, and there will be several times where you'll have to give up on trying to clear a dungeon or trying to kill a certain NPC, as they'll simply be too strong for you. But the magic of Morrowind is the fact that you can come back later when you're stronger, have better spells and weapons, and you can now overcome these once unbeatable enemies, and you literally prove your progress just by playing the game. However, Skyrim loses this sense of power, and a level 1 character plays and feels extremely similar to a level 50 character. Sure, you'll have some more moves and perks in your bag, like faster and stronger power swings, spells get flashier and larger, and your armor gets sturdier, but gameplay and enemies feel mostly the same. Instead of bandits, you're now fighting bandit thugs and marauders, frost and blood dragons instead of regular dragons, and Draugr wights and scourges instead of regular Draugr, and so on. And these aren't unique different enemy types. They're just beefier, leveled versions of the same enemies with some mild changes, such as different elemental breaths for dragons, better weapons and armor for enemies, and stronger spells for mage enemies. Fuck that blizzard spell, by the way. It's hard to feel stronger when the enemies are great.
I wholly agree.
Keeping pace with you, and your moves don't change all that much. But at least you can feel a little juicy now and then by killing the now fodderized base Draugr and bandits in one swing of spell. Or feel like OJ when you activate one of Skyrim's slick kill animations. But overall, it's an overbalanced progression system that's...
What's going on? The video is buffering? Seriously? YouTube, what's going on? I don't think there's anything wrong with my connection.
In order to keep gameplay as consistent as possible. But anyway, we return to Skyrim's opening, and after creating my shitty kitty, we get bent over to get our head lopped off, but not before an extremely evil-looking dragon lands above us and starts wrecking the place. In Skyrim's opening, although a bit drawn out with a carriage ride and waiting around to get executed, is pretty good at hooking the player in with some pretty nice spectacle. Alduin is absolutely thrashing Helgen. Buildings are destroyed and on fire, dead NPCs litter the roads, and the Imperials are desperately trying to kill Alduin, completely oblivious to the fact that he has TGM on.
Alright, seriously, dude. What's going on? Is my connection actually that unstable? No, I don't think so. I am, like, actually streaming at this. Let's see if we can't... Why is it in 50? $720p 50. Huh. Did he actually upload it in 50? That's kind of funny.
And we can choose to either go with Hadvar or Rayloft to start the tutorial. And I go with Hadvar because he was kind of nice to me. And I love this line reading he does when he sees Rayloft.
Alright, let's reload.
Dragon lands above us and starts wrecking the place. In Skyrim's opening, although a bit drawn out with a carriage ride and waiting around to get executed, is pretty good at hooking the player in with some pretty nice spectacle. Alduin is absolutely thrashing Helgen. Buildings are destroyed and on fire, dead NPCs litter the roads, and the...
Wow, look at that. Look at that quality. That's amazing. 144p. Damn. Okay, seriously, either YouTube is fucking up majorly, or my my provider is. Just fucking buffering. Seriously. Seriously? Let's what happens if I click on another video?
You know, guys,
oh yeah, that one just loads instantly. Awesome. So I know YouTube sometimes has trouble playing videos for some reason.
You know, guys, DEF CON Everybody Dies is probably one of the more interesting. You know, guys, DEF CON Everybody Dies is probably one of the more.
Yeah, see, I know no problem. Playing a video from some ordinary gamers, but this one for some reason just refuses. And I'm not gonna watch this at 144p, dude. No way. I might have to though. This is technical troubles for stream, dude. Alright, fine. I give up. Auto me.
The place. In Skyrim's opening, although a bit drawn out with a carriage ride and waiting around to get executed, is pretty good at hooking the player in with some pretty nice spectacle. Alduin is absolutely.
I mean, it's not like we actually need to see this, right? We've probably seen this 1,000 times before.
Helgen. Buildings are destroyed and on fire, dead NPCs litter the roads, and the Imperials are desperately trying to kill Alduin, completely oblivious to the fact that he has TGM on. And we can choose to either go with Hadvar or Rayloff to start the tutorial. And I go with Hadvar because he was kind of nice to me. And I love this line reading he does when he sees Rayloff. Hadvar's fucking pissed. Inside Helgen Keep, we can get familiar with the combat system, as we get access to most of the weapon types, and we have to.
This dude's trying so hard to just love things, it seems. Like he's trying way too hard. Some of the time.
Kill a few storm.
Seriously. Thank you. Do I like have to just pause the video and let it load? Or maybe we'll just watch another video while we wait for this to maybe fix itself. This is so weird. Alright, let's see. I had another one in mind too, which is it doesn't get better than Skyrim, which is a pretty short one, 30 minutes. Let's see if this is any better. Or did I already? Nah, nothing. Really? Why is it that I can play some videos, but not others? See, this one loads just fine. Alright, okay. Let's just jump over to this one then. This is Why Skyrim is a Masterpiece, Retrospective Analysis by FuzzDev. Try restarting your browser. No, see, but like... I mean, maybe. It might work. But like, this video works. Which is why it's so odd. It's like just certain videos that are like pushed all into the background of YouTube servers just refuse to load. And this has happened before. Just not on stream, obviously. But okay, maybe I will try to exit out of this. And then try again. No? Nothing? This is really weird. All right. Well, let's see. Hopefully this doesn't kill the stream, but let's try this. Just completely exiting everything except for OBS. Starting up Chrome again. Opening up a new window for YouTube. And trying to play the video.
We have to kill a few Stormcloak stragglers to escape.
Well, we're back at
Spell sword type play
144p, so
style, swinging a sword in one hand and casting destruction spells in the other. Skyrim's combat has gotten some much needed mechanical upgrades. One upgrade being something I like to call the hand system. It seems that Tamrielians have discovered ambidextry since the Oblivion Crisis.
it keeps
You can
upgrading.
now equip weapons and spells in both your left and right hands, letting you swing weapons and cast spells simultaneously, dual wield, and dual cast. And it's pretty sweet, giving the game's combat a lot of added robustness and potential. Melee combat is much more mechanically satisfying than Oblivion, and you're no longer bouncing off enemy blocks and getting chain staggered into next Mordas.
I mean, is it really more satisfying though? I mean, it's so floaty, and I know this exact criticism is thrown around a lot, but it truly is floaty, and it doesn't feel like your hits have any impact. But that's basically how it's been with all the Elder Scrolls games. None of them have good combat.
And attacks hit harder overall, and basic swings no longer drain your fatigue. And power attacks no longer feel clunky and disconnected. But ironically,
Oh yeah, they definitely do.
the melee combat has become even more mindless, as you barely need to worry about enemy blocks or positioning. And the average encounter boils down to staggering an enemy with a power swing, wailing on them, power swinging again, and repeat. It's dead simple. And it gets the job done. Slicing a bandit to death or pulling off a kill animation is never not satisfying. And the sound effects give a nice pop and crunch when hitting enemies. But there isn't much at all in terms of strategy. Nor does combat strategy change much throughout the game. Melee combat is now supplemented mostly by smithing, a brand new skill that replaces armorer. Gear no longer has durability, and all gear can now be crafted at forges, and can be improved at grindstones and armor workbenches. And tons of ores from iron to ebony have all been added. You can either buy them, loot them, or grab a pickaxe and mine and smelt it yourself like a real pleb. And the smithing system works great for what it sets out to do. And being able to craft any armor or weapon for yourself is a much needed addition to Elder Scrolls. And there's an actual fuck ton of stuff to craft, especially with
I don't know. It just feels like they're kind of bloating the game. At one point, there's so much to do that you're not doing anything. You know what I mean?
odds. Goddamn. And it gives the player a lot of clear goals to work towards. And it adds more options for players to make more money and to acquire new gear. Although post-patches, getting that smithing skill all the way up to make Daedric armor is a huge time and money sink. And when I grinded my smithing all the way to 91 time, I think I'd crafted enough elven bows to arm an entire platoon of Thalmor soldiers. And I don't recommend the grind. It's nice to no longer have to worry about durability, but at the same time it just further streamlines an already heavily streamlined system. But the sheer volume of shit to craft and materials to collect does help mitigate this. Moving on to spells, Magic has gotten some very similar upgrades, and spells are much flashier than in previous games. And I love the
I'm sorry, what? You can't say that and also be talking about Morrowind.
way the spells look in your hands and how it feels to cast these things. It has great effects and sound design that really give the spells a kick and visual flair
I mean, you just basically press the mouse button.
that they were lacking in previous games. Oblivion fireballs looked like you were shooting a ghostly meatball, and you can now shoot stream spells to piss all over your enemies, at the cost of touch spells, which have been removed. And through perk investment, you can unlock double casting spells to shoot off an even more powerful version of the spell you have, with some awesome effects and animations as well. Kamehameha and even a shitty little fire spell looks sick. However, with the removal of attributes, magic is no longer tied to any intelligence or willpower stats to determine your magicka. Instead, magicka and enchanting are now tied together like this. Enchant is back as a skill, and it's your main way of buffing up your magicka reserves. As any strict magic character will need to wear robes that either reduce magic costs, buff magic regeneration, or ideally both. You can find tiered robes of X School of Magic in dungeons or as quest rewards, and these robes are your main form of magic progression alongside your obligatory tiered spell perk upgrades. That is, until you reach Enchant 100 and unlock the dual enchant perk so you can apply a double regenerate magicka enchant to several pieces of armor, which effectively gives you infinite magicka, and it trivializes the magic system entirely. Enchanting is straightforward, and it's fun to trap souls and gather up enchanted items out in the world to add to your library of effects. But as a mage, you'll want to reach Enchant 100 as soon as possible for free blue juice, so get ready to grind some dollar store petty soul gem enchants.
But you don't really even have to do that. I mean, the problem with a lot of the systems in Skyrim I found is that you don't really have to, use any of them. You can just play the game, go from one place to the next, and just bash your way or magic your way through the dungeon. You don't really have to buy gear. You don't have to enchant gear. You don't have to forge gear. So for just playing the game, there's no reason to really do any of this, because you can just play the game. I mean, I guess it has its use in role-playing settings, but then again, you can't really role-play a lot in Skyrim. If you want to role-play, you're just gonna have to go off-grid, kind of, in the way that you don't talk to people and stuff like that, and you don't even go in dungeons, because it's like a D&D group where everyone just becomes murder hobos. That's basically your character in Skyrim. No matter what you do, you're going to become a murder hobo.
Spellcrafting has also been completely removed for some reason. Not sure why. All it does is hurt the magic system and make it less robust and interesting. So outside of mods, you're stuck with whatever spell tomes you can find or buy. For example, say you want to be a fire mage. You first start with a weak fire spray spell. Then you get a fireball. Then a bigger fireball. And then an even bigger fireball. And then when you reach master destruction, you get a fire AoE. Ooh, we're getting daring. It's not the craziest shit in the world, and most spell tiers are just slightly more powerful versions of spells, while being functionally the same. Spellmaking could have really helped this lack of variety, as you'd be able to make modified stream and projectile spells. Maybe you could craft an extendo stream spell that can constantly damage faraway enemies, or you can make a short stream spell that
Wait, the fucking lightning bolts also explode? What?
Was on contact. Just something. And just having a spellcrafting system will effectively 10x the spell count. But Todd wasn't having that shit, for reasons God probably doesn't even know. Mysticism has been mercifully executed after being on death's door for 7 years, and things like levitating freely have been reduced to ancient myths in the series by now. But at least you can now engage in some necromancy and raise slain enemies to fight for you as zombies. It's pretty cool to watch. Despite the added flashiness and robustness of dual casting, in the hand system letting you dual cast or cast 2 different spells at once, magic has never been more bare bones. The last combat archetype is probably one you're very familiar with if you played Skyrim at all, the Stealth Archer. Thanks to Skyrim's advanced technology, archery is now a viable and mechanically satisfying method of attack, finally breaking out of the crusty as fuck jail it was stuck in for Oblivion and Morrowind. And shooting bows has never been...
Come on, archery in Morrowind was good. I mean, serviceable. In Oblivion, it really did suck.
Better. And you combine this improved archery with sneak to land sneak attacks that do multiple times the damage. You get the stealth archer domination you see all the time. I personally don't indulge in the starcher too much, as I find it too plotting and boring to snipe these actual bots in a methodical and careful way. I'd rather just bum rush through any given area and get right up in my enemy's face, close enough to give them a little kiss before doing a running jump stab on them. But I understand why it's such a prominent playstyle. It's pretty fun to land a long shot on the head of a bandit's dick and watch their ragdoll crumple over on kill cam from that 6x sneak damage. It's pretty sweet. But once we fight through Helgen and
I'm pretty sure the game won't actually do kill cam from that.
escape through some caves, we get our step out moment. And like I mentioned before, Skyrim looks fantastic. and this is no exception. We see Alduin fly off after his massacre in Soul Feast, and we get pointed towards the nearby town Riverwood. And along the way, you'll probably pass the Guardian Stones, which is how Skyrim handles signs. Instead of signs, we now have these standing stones that you can
Yeah, Skyrim handles signs the same way it handles all of the other systems it has. You don't have to engage with it.
find and activate to get either a buff or a power that you can usually use once a day. I like that it gives you more control of your buffs, as you can swap between stones. But I rarely ever use these stones, usually just sticking to whatever Guardian Stone I chose that increased the level up rate of either Warrior, Mage, or Thief skills, as the others are pretty useless most of the time. Like the Tower Stone letting you unlock one expert or lower level lock for free once a day. Not even Master Locks, which can be busted open by any character at any lockpick security level, which, like Oblivion, is a minigame, except it's even easier. It's just a reskin for Fallout 3. I arrive in Riverwood and get roped into a family reunion dinner with Hadvar and his uncle to progress the main story.
Husband, let him tell his story.
Not much more to tell. This dragon flew over and just wrecked the whole place. Mass confusion.
Can we hurry this up, guys? Speaking of NPCs, they have been retooled from Oblivion, still retaining their full schedules where they'll sleep, go to their jobs, and go eat at the inns. But they have been simplified quite a bit. The Radiant AI system has been essentially completely removed, and NPCs will only interact with other NPCs during scripted interactions and conversations, or as part of story quests. It removes the potential for NPCs to bug out, or for them to get into some unintended goofy shenanigans. But I'm disappointed that the system was killed rather than iterated on, and it makes Skyrim's NPCs comparatively static and boring compared to Oblivion's, a game that came out 5 years before this one. It's not as bad as Morrowind's NPCs, where half the population can't even walk or move from their designated spots. But at least the text-based dialogue made up for these drawbacks, with each NPC having a lot more to say about a broad range of topics.
I don't know. I kind of prefer Morrowind's way of doing things just because it's easier to find people when you need them. Usually in Skyrim and Oblivion, if you need to find someone, they'll have a quest marker on them. But in certain instances, they won't, and you want to talk to them. Just, to either check out something or, role play, God forbid. But you'll be unable to find them, no matter where you look. So, to Morrowind's defense, it does have its drawbacks to have NPCs walk around. Funnily enough, I think Majora's Mask did a much better job of NPC scheduling, but that's a discussion for another time.
You no longer have a 0 to 100 reputation score with NPCs. An NPC reputation is now an invisible stat that you can only really raise if you do a quest for said character. And character reputations don't really matter much at all, outside of when you want to go get married, as your potential spouse needs to like you first, and the other characters who like you will show up for the ceremony, which is a nice touch. But reputation in Skyrim is essentially worthless in any other context. Skyrim's NPCs are pretty limited in conversation as well, and many NPCs just have 2 to 4 conversation options each. And the more generic NPCs don't have any dialogue at all outside of some blurbs, such as, yes, or need something, or I work for Belethor at the general goods store. As for the ones that do talk, their dialogue is usually too brief and generic to present any truly memorable or interesting characters, outside of a handful, like Paarthurnax, the loud-ass preacher Heimskir, Neloth, and a few others. Just for example, take Jarl Balgruuf here, Mr. Jarl Balin himself. He has the potential to be an interesting character. He's a tough, yet fair Jarl, who employs a Dunmer as his housecarl. He's a proud Nord to be sure, yet he's more worldly and tolerant than your average Stormcloak meathead, and as such, finds himself torn on what to do for his city, and whose side to take in the Civil War. However, through dialogue with him and his underlings,
Well,
we actually learn.
I don't think he's actually torn, is he? He seems pretty comfortable siding with the Empire. It's just he doesn't want the Empire soldiers stationed there. Isn't that his whole shtick?
Very little about the man himself beyond generic Nordic traits of honor, and that he's a benevolent ruler, and an all-around class act. We learn him and Irilith had bonded over their time fighting in the Imperial Legion, and that's why she had been raised to her unusual position as a female Dunmer in service to a Nordic Jarl. But outside of learning that they're war buddies, we don't get any specific stories or extra info on how they got to become so loyal to each other, or how other nobles would have reacted to her being raised to such a high status. And it just feels totally undercooked, and less interesting and memorable as a result. There is some character development to him, as he eventually takes the side of the Imperials during the Civil War quest line. But it's not really much of a choice, and he chooses only after a quick chat with his advisors, and he just says, Fuck that milk drinker Ulfric. Go shove his axe up his Bleak Falls barrow for me. Thanks. And this is just one of many examples of underdeveloped characters. Skyrim is full of a lot of interesting character setups, but there's very little lore
Delphine.
to actually make us care and remember these characters. Morrowind's text-based only characters had way more personality, and characters like Divith Fear, Any Telvanni Lord, Caius, Crassus Curio, and more are still very memorable to me. Even the racist, dumber thugs pressing Julio were more memorable than most Skyrim characters, even though we don't hear what their voices sound like at all. But tangent aside, Alvor asked us to go to Whiterun and ask the Jarl for some guards to defend Riverwood from a possible dragon attack. Dragons have returned to
Wow, he's jumping around a lot.
Skyrim for the first time since the First Era, and Alduin is resurrecting his boys to terrorize the local Nordic population. Now's probably a good time to explain the background of this game's story, as a decent amount of shit has happened since the
Well, now you're starting to explain the story. I thought you were in the story all along. Alright.
crisis. It is now year 201 of the Fourth Era, around 200 years after Oblivion. Since Martin's sacrifice and the end of the Septim bloodline, a new imperial dynasty has come to power following a 7-year interregnum. While the Empire was reeling from the loss of the Septim dynasty and was trying to reestablish its central authority, the Elven Empire of the Third Aldmeri Dominion had begun gaining in power and had brought the Somerset Isles, Valen Wood, and elsewhere under their control. And this dominion was led by the Thalmor, Altmer ultra-nationalists who believe in elven supremacy over the races of men. Around 30 years before the events of Skyrim, the Dominion invaded Cyrodiil and kicked off the Great War, and had even captured the Imperial City. But miraculously, the reeling Empire was able to regroup and recapture the city from the Thalmor. And this battle is the story of the Elder Scrolls Legends card game, where you, the player, take the Emperor's place and lead his armies to victory. Yeah, remember this fucking game? Anyway,
Nope.
the recapture of the Imperial City had exhausted both sides.
Didn't they just kill off Legends?
Gold Concordant, an iffy at best peace deal that saw the dissolution of the Blades, the removal of Hammerfell from the Empire, and the outlawing of the worship of the Ninth Divine, the man-turned-god Talos, as the Thalmor couldn't stand the veneration of a smooth-eared, hairy-assed man. Ariel's balls, we can't be having that. This banning of Talos, who the Nords are pretty fond of, I love you, obviously didn't go over well. And these bans led to heightened tensions between the Empire and its Talos-worshipping subjects, and eventually led to the Stormcloak Rebellion, led by Ulfric of the same name, who rebelled against the Empire for being cucked by those piss-skinned knife-ears, and for infringing on their Talos-glazing lifestyle. And they're the reason that we got arrested to begin with, as the Empire assumed us to be part of the Stormcloaks. But if an ongoing civil war was bad enough for daily life in Skyrim, we now have to deal with a primordial world-eating dragon that just reappeared and is now raising his dragon army to further destroy the land and eventually devour the entire planet of Nirn. Sweet. Sounds like we got our plate full. But for now, we need to head on over to Whiterun to ask for troops.
My
So
god,
instead
you're
of sending
jumping
our
around a
town
lot.
representatives to go, they send me, a heavily armed vagrant who was an Imperial prisoner just a few hours ago. I head on over to Whiterun, which is my favorite city in the game. I spend the most time here, and it's got a cool looking castle on a hill style design, with some heavy inspiration from Rohan from the Lord of the Rings movies. There are 9 total cities in Skyrim, but there are actually only 5 distinct cities with interesting designs, those being Whiterun, Solitude, Skyrim's capital built on a massive overhanging rock, Markarth, a former dwarven city that was re-inhabited by the local Nords, Riften, a seedy port city with Skyrim's most dangerous sewers, Windhelm, the oldest city in Skyrim, having an ancient Nordic-style architecture and massive grey stone walls and palaces. But the other cities, Dawnstar, Morthal, Winterhold, and Falkreath, all feel more like expanded towns rather than proper cities, and they all look pretty much the same with the same generic building types. I really like how varied the actual distinct cities are, and they're pretty dense with things to do and people to talk to. And some places like Solitude and Whiterun look spectacular from a distance, but they're still fairly small compared to Oblivion cities, and the non-distinct cities are a bit of a disappointment. Like, who the fuck wants to live in Morthal? But regardless, I talked to Jarl Ball.
True.
Takes my word on the whole dragon attack thing, and agrees to garrison Riverwood for us. Nice. He then asked me to help his court wizard find the Dragonstone in Bleak Falls Barrow, and it's a good first dungeon dive, and it really sets a good bar for what to expect in later dungeons. We fight through bandits and Draugr. So many fucking Draugr. And Skyrim's dungeons are definitely the most linear in the entire series, where you go through hallways and large open rooms fighting enemies, dodging traps, gathering loot, and occasionally solving some puzzles. But don't sweat the puzzles. These ancient Nords can only make puzzles that match the intellect of a preschooler matching shapes in a picture book. In Bleak Falls Barrow, we have to do a picture match puzzle with these spinning pillars. And once we get past this brain teaser, we then have to get this ancient door open, which can only be opened with a metallic claw and a picture combination input. But the claw has the door combo on it, which is a good puzzle only once, as it forces you to take a look at the claw model in your inventory.
Not even once, dude.
Which is clever the first time
Not
around
even
for
once.
sure, but it's an absolute joke every time after. And I feel like an ancient Nordic kindergartner opening this door. Once you reach the end, you'll find the boss enemy, a word wall if you're in a Nordic barrow, an obligatory end dungeon loot chest, and usually a convenient shortcut that loops back towards the dungeon entrance. These ancient Nordic architects were very forward thinking, putting in some ancient fire escapes. How nice of them. It's a pretty straightforward and static approach to dungeon design, perfectly tuned to scratch that
Ancient fire escapes. It's a fun thing to think about.
gamer itch. You cut through the grunt enemies, loot small amounts of gold and potions from their bodies and other various containers, kill the boss, then collect your spoils of underwhelming level dungeon loot. And when you leave, you get that cleared note next to the dungeon in question on the map. Speaking of, this map is awesome. It's an active, full 3D model of all of Skyrim, and the icons look clean and crisp, and it takes up the entire screen. Thank God. And you can pan and tilt to your heart's content. It's a pretty great map, and I've never had a better time fast traveling from place to place.
In what sense is that a great map? I mean, and it's not really a full 3D model either. It's like, it doesn't have any buildings. It's basically just landscape, but it's horrible to navigate. There are clouds, which sometimes makes so you can't see, the ground. It's hard to make out any kind of roads on the map because for some reason they didn't include them. Even though it's supposed to be kind of like a over-the-top view of the world. It's kind of a bad map, dude. It's kind of a bad map.
But anyway, back to what I was saying about dungeons. Dungeons are usually in the form of caves, Dwemer ruins, or Nordic ruins. And lots of different enemy types can hole up in these dungeons, like bandits, evil mages, draugr, beasts, forsworn, falmer, giants, hag ravens, spriggans, skeevers, bears, so on and so forth. And some of these dungeons can get pretty large and interesting, but I'll talk more about this later. It's a more robust version of Oblivion's dungeons, and the dungeons here just simply feel more detailed and dense. There's more stuff to pick up and pilfer and interact with, and the dungeons usually have tighter and more unique layouts. And they don't feel like randomly generated, mostly empty ruins or caves that many Oblivion dungeons felt like. But once we solve these cute little puzzles and kill the Draugr Lord in front of the word wall, we get the Dragon Stone and return to Whiterun. Not now. But oh shit, a dragon is attacking the Western Watchtower. So I go with Jarl Balin's Dunmer Mistress here, and we head over to take on the dragon, who comes back for round 2 when we arrive. Dragons are Skyrim's Oblivion Gates, and are the most complex enemies in the entire Elder Scrolls series, as they can fly all around you, spray their breath on the move and while hovering in the air, and they can land and take off to keep the dynamics of the fight.
I never thought I'd hear someone call the dragons in Skyrim complex. Or, well, okay, the most complex enemy in the Elder Scrolls series. That's not saying a lot, though.
Like constantly shifting. And as far as presentation and spectacle, this dragon fight makes a great first impression, as this is likely your first real dragon fight. So seeing this spiky, jagged, flying kill lizard making his way towards you is proper intimidating. The dragons exist as a sort of overworld mini-boss, and they can appear at pretty much any time to try and nom on you. Even cities and settlements aren't safe. This dragon decided to lay siege to the College of Winterhold to try and kill me, and despite the odd choice to attack the only place where all of Skyrim's strongest and essential mages are gathered, dragon attacks in these open-air settlements really help to give the dragons a more powerful presence, and it reminds the player that shit ain't supposed to be safe.
Actually, it reminds the player that the dragons are actually stupid as shit. I mean, I thought dragons were supposed to be, kind of smart, wise, because they're probably very old, lived a long time, so they've seen a lot. But dragons literally attacking the most powerful mages in the entire province does not seem very smart or wise.
There's a Neo-Dragon War going on right now, but if you don't want to wait for one to descend upon you, you can find a dragon at any marked mountain peak, where you can usually find a dragon guarding a word wall and some level loot chests, and they're integrated into Skyrim's world pretty seamlessly, and you never really know when a dragon is going to fly in to take a shit all over your travel session. But the combat with dragons is a bit underwhelming after your first few encounters. Until you get your hands on Dragon Rend, your dragon fights will mostly boil down to you taking pot shots at the airborne dragon with spells or arrows, and then viciously hitting it in the head with your weapon and chucking potions to tank out the point-blank breath blast until it dies. And hopefully you get a cool kill animation on it. And this is how it'll go for pretty much every dragon fight. If you fought 5 dragons, you fought 500 dragons. as the stronger dragons don't have any other extra attacks. Just maybe some elemental differences, and that's it. And these dragon fights can get pretty crusty in certain situations, such as dragons never landing due to uneven terrain, or they'll land pretty far away and you'll have to take a small hike to reach their landing zone. And other times the dragons can get distracted mid-fight and will fly away and start attacking some other enemies far away from you. And I had a dragon stop our fight to go take on some frost trolls for a few minutes.
That's like literally just Skyrim's combat system.
It's just incredibly disrespectful.
Not very unique to dragons.
Overall, the dragons are still impressively dynamic as far as Elder Scrolls enemies go. But beyond your first few fights, the dragons end up just being another enemy type, and sometimes even a major pain in the ass. And they have a surprising lack of strategy outside of just using Dragon Rend to ground their scaly asses. But regardless, after letting most of Jarl Balin's men do the work
When Dragon Rend actually works.
here, we kill the dragon, and I then devour its soul as its flesh is burned clean off, leaving only a skeleton and a pretty cool looking effect. You can see the heat and light go out from the dragon's body. Once we slurp up this dragon's soul, the guards then fangirl the fuck out and proclaim me as Dragonborn, a mortal who has the ability to steal the souls of dragons and use the power of the Thum, aka the Shout, to essentially speak spells into existence. You see, dragons don't just spray fire and ice breaths, they speak those breaths into existence in their own language. And a fight between dragons could be seen more as an argument rather than a straightforward brawl. And every time we kill a dragon and take its soul, we can use the soul to unlock one part of his shout.
Actually, that's one thing I've been thinking about. So, like, the dragons are, like, supposed to be the masters of the Thum, right? But literally the only thing that happens when you fight the dragons are they using their breath attacks on you. And that's it. I mean, fucking Alduin has the only has the fire shower thing, the meteor shower. That's basically all he does, except for, like, you know, normal dragon behavior.
And each shout has 3 words each, which we can unlock the words for by visiting word walls or as part of quests. Back in Bleak Falls Barrow, we learned the first word of Unrelenting Force, and we can now boost. The shouts exist as sort of an alternate magic system that any character can use, as all the shouts are on a cooldown, rather than being resource-based like Magicka. And shouts can do a multitude of things, like the classic Fusro Da Force Blast, Fire and Ice Breaths, Whirlwind Sprint, Disarm, Invulnerability, buff your attack speed, illusion-type effects like Animal Allegiance and Fury, and so on. It's a mechanic that has some really great in-universe lore and justifications, and Fusro Da is a literal meme from how famous it is. But I usually only shout it in really tough situations, mostly using it to ragdoll blast tough enemies away so I can get a few extra hits in on them. And it works well as an upsleeved ace or a get out a certain death card, but its simplicity and limited number of shout effects keep shouting as mostly a situational power. But the sound design for these shouts are pretty great, and the thunder crashing booms of your Thum really give them a solid mechanical kick I was really satisfied with.
And yet again, another system in Skyrim that you don't really have to engage with, because well, it's subpar. It's nice to have, but there's also the cooldown issue, which most shouts aren't really powerful enough to warrant having that large of a cooldown. So, yeah. This is also something I probably need to, you know, organize my thoughts about, but the shout system is cool for the first hour or so, and then it's like, whatever.
But with our new shouting powers unlocked, we hear a loud rumbling coming from the throat of the world, and we return to Jarl Balin, who tells us that it's the Greybeard summoning us.
Oh, and sometimes, maybe sometimes after you've learned some cool shouts, like become ethereal or slow time, for example, then it's kind of cool to test things out, but usually you won't find that much use for it, and especially outside of combat.
Them being a reclusive group of Nords who have practiced Thuming their whole lives, and live in an ancient citadel near the summit of Skyrim's tallest mountain, the throat of the world. JB tells us not to keep the geezers waiting, but before we head out, we're greeted by Lydia, our new housecarl and a potential follower. Skyrim's follower system is actually pretty damn solid, and any follower you have will not get pissed off at you for attacking them, and can only be killed while attacked in a down state, called the protected state, which is fucking fantastic, as it's almost impossible not to assault your follower in close quarters combat scenarios, or singe them with a spell at times. And there's also a metric shit ton of potential follower NPCs you can come across, and they come in all different class and attack types.
And all of them are basically the same.
You can get a lot of extra support out of these guys, at a cost of these followers being mostly incredibly generic sheeple with not much to say at all. But I prefer to travel alone, so I tell Lydia to go kick rocks, and I head on over to Iverstead to climb the 7,000 steps to High Hrothgar, and I get past the noob killer troll, the bastard love child of the bridge dude from Morrowind and his skeleton companion.
Okay, so I actually did have some trouble with this troll, but I don't see how people can call this a noob killer, because it's pretty easy just, you know, kiting him away while using a bow or something. I mean, okay, fine. If you're going for a pure melee build, then sure, he can be a bit overwhelming if you just go straight through the main quest, which you are incentivized to do, kind of. But like a couple levels, I think, and you'll probably be fine. But there's definitely a problem about it being this early in the main quest when you're incentivized to go purely for the main quest. I guess the devs were thinking that, maybe they will happen upon some caves and go explore them as they travel from point to point. But realistically, that's not going to happen, because you will be fast traveling between points, and also there aren't really any or that many caves, depending on which route you take, to High Hrothgar. And also, there are quests that will kind of just present themselves to the player, which I guess they suppose, maybe they'll do this and that. But I don't know. It feels like a kind of a weird design decision to have a static leveled troll at this point, when basically most of the game is leveled, or at least they try to, conform to the player and how strong you are. Another thing I'm gonna have to organize my thoughts around, but I think that's basically the gist of it. Why is this level? Why is this troll such high leveled when it's possible to go straight here from the start of the game without doing anything, literally anything else?
And once past this literal and figurative troll,
and it's like, sure, you could have have problems defeating it, and go do some other stuff until you're strong enough. But that does not feel good at all. But specifically because you're on the main quest path. So you should be able to take it down without problems. Unless the game tells you otherwise. At least that's what I'm thinking initially.
we reach High Hrothgar, and we enter to meet with the Greybeards. I impress them with the power and the girth of my Thune, and they teach me a new shout, Whirlwind Sprint, after a drawn-out training sequence. And a lot of Skyrim storytelling is done by the player watching NPCs talk to each other and slowly walk from place to place. And it's all completely unskippable, which is fine for a first-time playthrough. But this has got to be like my 12th time running through this part of the main quest. And watching these Greybeards flap their unskippable gums at you and slowly following them around from dialogue to dialogue feels agonizingly slow. But once you learn the Whirlwind Sprint
Yeah, that's a good point. And also the whole cooldown thing. When you're testing out the shouts, they will reset your cooldown, but only after the actual cooldown has been it's 50% done. So it's just kind of weird. Just another quirk of Skyrim, like a bad pacing. Skyrim is full of bad pacing.
We are then tasked to find the horn of Jurgen Windcaller, the founder of the Greybeards and their Way of the Voice. Jurgen himself was an ancient Nordic general who fought against the Dwemer and the Chimer in their conquest of Morrowind. And during the Battle of Red Mountain, his Nord army got whooped so badly by the elves, Jurgen gave up war completely and founded the Greybeards and their Way of the Voice as a pacifistic and natural usage of shouts. My boy Nerevar gave this man a generational humbling. Literally. The horn can be found in another Nordic crypt. So another platoon of Draugr later, we find Jurgen's coffin in this pretty cool chamber that has these massive statues come and rise up out of the water. But instead of Jurgen's horn, we find a note telling us to go to the inn at Riverwood and to ask for the attic room. And when we do that, we meet a woman named Delphine, who gives us the horn, and then tells us to follow her to her secret basement, which is hidden behind a dresser with a false panel in a room at the inn. And this room is so well hidden, it took over 5 minutes for the local drunk to find the secret staircase just very well
that's funny.
Spy rooms aside, Delphine presses us about our dragonborn status and asks her to accompany us to a dragon burial mound to hopefully find and kill a dragon to prove ourselves. As for now, she isn't revealing anything about herself. I first run the horn back to the Greybeards, who teach me the Roda parts of the Unrelenting Force shout after another somewhat drawn-out, unskippable training sequence. And we get a taste of the Thum Shaker to complete our training. And once that's done, Arngir says to us, so, congrats, bro. That's all we got for you. Have a nice life, brother. So I next head to Kynesgrove to kill another dragon. And when we arrive, we find Alduin reviving his fallen brother. And we actually speak to him for the first time, where Alduin roasts me for not being bilingual in Dragonese, and he tells us that we can't do shit to stop his upcoming voring of the world. And he then flies off after sicking his newly revived dragon on us. It's another straightforward dragon fight, and luckily he aggroes on Delphine rather than me, and she can take these breath blasts like a champ. So we kill the dragon.
That's actually completely normal from this point on. I think most times where you are faced with a pretty big challenge, you have a follower and the enemies will just go straight for them. And that makes these boss battles laughably easy.
And eat its soul to finally gain her trust. And she reveals that she is one of the last surviving members of the Blades, who had been outlawed and hunted down by the Thalmor since the signing of the White Gold Concordant. And due to this, Delphine believes the Thalmor must have some part in the dragons returning, and that we must break into their embassy to rifle through their documents to see what they know, despite the fact that we just watched the boss man dragon himself revive one right in front of us. So we prepare to infiltrate the embassy, and Delphine points us to leave our gear with her informant Malborn, who works in the embassy. This mission probably is the most unique setup and structure in the entire main quest, as we have to choose which items to give to Malborn to use later.
That says so much about the main quest, that this is the most unique one.
And then we have to don some party robes and infiltrate the embassy. It's a cool idea, but its execution is dead simple and straightforward. And after stripping down to my kitty suit, I get dressed for the party and we enter the embassy. We can start our investigation proper by giving some booze to this Redguard dude, who starts a loud toast that allows us to escape into the kitchen where we can grab our items. And from here, it's a pretty straightforward combat dungeon, and you'll be slaying a few knife ears as you look for their dossiers on the dragons.
Except it's not supposed to be just a combat dungeon. It's like they like kind of say that oh, maybe you could sneak in, but in reality that's not really possible unless you have either extremely high sneak skill, which you won't have at this point, or you use invisibility magic. But that also has its flaws because, well, since this is Skyrim, you are going to get in combat at the end anyways. So, yeah. You can't sneak your way through the entire thing. And even if you can, you're still met with a combat encounter at the end. It's really dumb.
You don't need to worry about keeping quiet or putting the embassy on alert once you get here, as no one at the party can hear the carnage going on a few rooms over. And no one can raise the alarm if there's no witnesses, right? I fight on through and I eventually find the dossiers on Delphine, the dragons, another blade named Esborn, and curiously, Ulfric Stormcloak himself, who the Thalmor mark as an asset, wanting to keep him alive to prolong the civil war to weaken both sides. And it's actually pretty interesting, and it makes you wonder if Ulfric knows he's a Thalmor pawn, or if he's even collaborating with them. And this dossier could be pretty damning if it leaked. But we can't do anything like that in this game, unfortunately. But I'm just saying, it'd be interesting if you could slip this dossier to Ulfric's right-hand man, Gunmar, and see how he reacts to it.
Yeah, this is really weird. But, well, the Thalmor isn't exactly allied with the Stormcloaks, right? I mean, I think they made that pretty clear during the Peace Council part of the main quest.
But no dice. With the dossiers in hand, we can make our escape to the Thalmor torture dungeon, and we return to Delphine to tell her that the Thalmor are unsurprisingly uninvolved with the dragon's return. But the more interesting thing about this confirmation is that Esbern is still alive, somewhere out in Riften. So we head there to find the old bastard. When we find him, we're pointed to talk to Brynjolf, which forces us into doing the first quest in the Thieves Guild, to steal a ring and plant it on a Dunmer with the Argonian named Branchet. So to progress the main quest, we have to condemn this guy to a life in prison. Sorry, bro. But once our grunt work is done, we go down in the Ratway to find Brynjolf, who won't even tell us where Esbern is. So we have to bribe Veckel the Man for his location, which is at the end of the Ratway warrants. So we continue on, killing blind homeless bums and sewer-dwelling thugs to find Esbern's house, and we find him on the other side of a comically fortified door. We convince him to come back with us, and we take him back to Riverwood for a belated reunion with Delphine. Luckily for us, Esbern has a lead on the dragons and Alduin's return, and that lead being a massive stone mural called Alduin's Wall, which is in Skyhaven Temple, a Lost Blade stronghold out in the Reach. So we head on over, and I get into this absolute clusterfuck of a battle, as a dozen or so Forsworn thugs are hanging out near the entrance, and a blood dragon swooped in to join in on the fun, and it was an absolute wash. But I enjoyed how chaotic it got, and it really shows how much more technologically robust Skyrim's engine is, compared to its older years.
Nope.
But after using some real cowardly play, I take down all the enemies, and we enter Karthspire and eventually find the entrance to the temple, which is blocked off by some puzzles. And these picture-matching pillar...
Oh yeah, that's kind of embellishing it. That's embellishing it a lot.
Puzzles were just way too complex for any unwashed Forsworn to figure out. So after using all my brain power to get past these puzzles, we enter the temple and find Alduin's Wall, which looks really sweet, having these esoteric and intricate carvings that show Alduin's rule, defeat, and his return. And from the wall, we learn that the ancient Nords had used a shout of some kind to defeat Alduin, but this shout is unknown to us. So we ask the Greybeards about the shout, and Argir reveals that it's called Dragonrend, a man-made shout that forces dragons to land, as the shout literally mind breaks the dragons, as it was made from the collective coping, seething, and dilating of the ancient dragonborns who lived under Alduin's despotic rule, and the dragons cannot even comprehend the immense hatred in the words of the shout. Argir tells us that only their master Parthenax knows the shout, and we have to go visit him at the top of the throne of the world to learn more. Once we reach the summit, we find that Parthenax is actually a dragon, and has been living and meditating at the top of the throne of the world since the dragon were all the way back in ancient Nordic time.
He's actually an old dog.
Meeting Parth for the first time is a classic moment. And it's crazy that this is the same voice actor for
I mean, come on. He looks like that one old dog. You know the picture. Glazed over eyes and like just kind of nose kind of up towards the air and stuff. I mean, I have this very, very specific picture in my mind of this.
Mario. Charles Martinet is showing some great range here.
As master, Uth Onik, old and wise.
Also, for some reason, all the dragons talk like Dora the Explorer.
We ask him about Dragonrend, but Parthi doesn't know it either, as the shout was literally incomprehensible to dragon minds. But Parthenax has an idea on how to find it. Luckily for us, this summit is the exact place where Alduin was defeated all those years ago. But he wasn't defeated, rather flung forward in time. So if we're able to find an Elder Scroll and read it here, we could take a look back in time to see the shout used in battle, and learn it that way. And this conversation with Parth is one of the more interesting ones in the game, as we get a glimpse into the psyche of the dragons themselves, and we learn that they aren't just tyrannically evil flying monsters, but are actually much more sophisticated and honorable than first appeared.
No, not really.
But outside of some allusions and comments made by Parthenax, we don't get a detailed look into dragon society and their history much at all. And all we really know is that dragons believe in might makes right, and they'll just follow whoever the strongest dragon currently is, which is Alduin. But regardless, we still have an Elder Scroll to find. Hey, that's the name of the game. And we get pointed to find it in a place called Blackreach, by a guy who wishes he could be as cracked out as Michael Kirkbride. And we enter a dwarven ruin and make our way to the scroll. This ruin is a pretty long dive unto itself, as you go through some ice caves that lead into ruins full of Dwemer automatons, which then leads into a Falmer-infested area that goes down pretty deep. And the Falmer are one of my favorite enemy types in Skyrim, them being blind, deformed descendants of the now extinct Snow Elf race, a race of pale elves who used to rule over Skyrim. But their race was mostly exterminated and displaced by Ysgramor and his 500 companions, during their Atmoran jihad to slaughter all the Snow Elves as revenge for the sacking of the humans.
Okay, but like, okay. These guys are like, it looks like their eyes have been gouged out and then just kind of their eye holes seared shut. Is that how all Falmer look? Or is this just the survivors? Because if these are the survivors, that makes no sense.
Human city of Sarthal. and those that survived the massacres were driven underground, where they were then subjugated by the Dwemer, who fed them toxic mushrooms to morph them into the monstrous bastards they are today.
Oh, I guess he kind of explains it then.
The enemies, they use poison and fashion all their gear out of chorus shells, massive toxic bugs they breed and fight alongside of. And some of these fights can get pretty hairy and challenging. The Falmer hit harder than you think, but we cut through them, and we get past a beefy-ass Centaurian. Skyrim rule of thumb. An enemy's size is usually pretty proportional to how hard they hit, and this steam breath air-fried my ass into a golden brown in a few seconds flat. But once it's dead, we can enter Blackreach, and this is another great moment in the main quest, as what you'd assume would be another straightforward dungeon dive opens up into a massive underground area that's almost the size of an entire overworld hold, and it's a great reveal. Although there isn't too much to do down here outside of fighting lots of Falmer, automatons, and doing one of the most dogshit side quests in gaming history to find all the Crimson Nirnroot. It's an interesting addition that adds some literal depth to the main quest. I head on over to the Tower of Mazarg and get the Elder Scroll out of this massive doohickey by doing this nonsensical button puzzle. I just press the buttons in sequence and it usually seems to work. And with the scroll, we can go back to Parth.
Yeah, does anyone actually understand this puzzle? I don't.
And learn Dragonrend. I pop open the scroll, which reveals to me another unskippable dialogue where I watch NPCs talk amongst each other. And I watch 3 ancient Dragonborn heroes fight and use Dragonrend on Alduin, where we finally learn the words to the shout. We also see one of the Nords use an Elder Scroll to banish Alduin from their time, as although Dragonrend had grounded him, they were still unable to fully defeat him. He still had TGM on. But be ready once you read this scroll, as once you do, you will then have to fight Alduin himself and use your new shout to defeat him. And it's a standard dragon battle with some fireballs falling down to earth to give the fight some extra spectacle. And I must have been a little under level for this fight, as Alduin is an absolute fridge of health. But after dragon rending his ass like 6 times, I can finally whittle his health down to 0. And although I absolutely bitched him, he says he can't be killed on Tamriel, and he flies away with his tail between his legs.
Yeah, but why? Is it ever explained why he can't be killed on Tamriel? I don't think it is.
Screeching, "I'll outlast you! I'll outlast you!" Yeah, we'll see. We speak with Parth again to figure out our next move, and he recommends that we capture and interrogate a dragon who follows Alduin to learn where he may have retreated to. But in order to do this, we need to convince Jarl Balin to let us bait a dragon into his palace and let us capture it using Dragonreach's Dragon Gallows. But Jarl Balin isn't comfortable with inviting a dragon into his house while the Civil War still threatens Whiterun, which kicks off the worst part of the main quest. As if you haven't completed the Civil War questline, you have to convince Ulfric and General Tullius to have a war council at High Hrothgar to placate Jarl Balin's anxieties. It's just a way too drawn-out, dialogue-heavy sequence where you have to sit through a long-ass, unskippable council sequence where the Stormcloaks and Imperials bitch and moan at each other for several minutes before we decide to do a city swap to placate both sides. And once that shit is done, Esbern pulls me aside to tell me that I can't hang out.
I mean, I think the political aspect of it is kind of interesting. Need to go now? Gotta walk my dogs. Sure, Retro Gamer. Thanks for stopping by. Have a good walk. And pet your dogs for me. What was I saying? Right, I think the political aspect is kind of interesting. I mean, the dialogue is so and so, but that's basically Skyrim. But the thing about the peace treaty thing is like you're expected to make these choices, but if you've just been railroading the main quest, you have no idea what you're actually agreeing to. Pretty sure you'd have to like make it a deep dive into the entire province to actually know what you're agreeing to. So it comes off as more like, sure, you take that and you take that and let's just be done. It doesn't feel like it has, it also doesn't feel like it has anything, it doesn't feel like it has an effect on anything either. Mostly probably because you don't know what will happen if they give away or gain these presumably tactical locations, right?
Out with the Blades anymore until I kill Parthenax, as the Blades have a deep-set Akaviri hatred of dragons. And when you tell Esbern, no, that's ridiculous, I in fact do not want to kill this dragon who has been nothing but wise and helpful to me because he was Alduin's advisor 6,000 years ago or something, who had also betrayed Alduin, helped the humans defeat the dragons, and has not been an issue since. But the usually wise and clever Esbern is oddly irrational on this problem, saying that Parthenax still deserves to die for his crimes he committed in the fucking Dawn era. and he must be killed. This is just forced conflict that's trying to make you choose between siding with the Blades or the Greybeards, but it falls completely flat, as the Blades aren't likable or logical enough for anyone to want to take their side on the Paarthurnax dilemma. And I feel like most Skyrim players just side with the wise dragon over these grumpy and forgettable bums Esbern and Delphine. Hell, there's even a mod to properly refuse them that has over 60,000 endorsements. At least something came from this bad writing. But now we can finally capture a dragon in Jarl Balin's garage. So I summon Odahviing, and we engage him in combat to snag his ass. You don't need to do anything fancy to capture him. Just get his health down far enough so that he will walk inside the capture area, and he gets put in the dragon stocks real fast. We talk to our detained dragon, and he tells us that Alduin has gone...
Okay, so I just noticed this, but this thing is made of wood. Maybe he can't turn his head properly, but like... Who the hell came up with the idea trap a fire-breathing dragon using wood?
...onto Sovngarde via a portal in Skull Dolphin, an ancient dragon cult citadel high up in the mountains. We can only reach it by air, but luckily for us, Odahviing here likes the cut of our jib and will give us a lift up to Skull Dolphin on his back. Sweet! So we free him and take the Odahviing Express up to Skull Dolphin. It's an enlarged Nordic ruin area, having us fight dragons and Draugr both inside and outside to reach the portal to Sovngarde, which is guarded by an injured dragon priest. The dragon priest is a tough fight for the main story, as his powerful magic can melt your ass without protection. But he
Yeah, why is the dragon priest injured?
also be cheesed a little bit, as he slowly approaches and picks up his staff before the fight starts, letting you get some free quick hits in. And once we kill the priest, we jam his staff into this hole to open the portal to Sovngarde. And Sovngarde's a pretty sweet place. We don't get to head to Aetherius very often in Elder Scrolls games, and this place has some great Nordic choir music and a sweet-looking ethereal skybox that really gives this place a mystical vibe. And we learn that Alduin had gone to Sovngarde to devour the souls sent there by the war to build his power back up from the absolute thrashing I gave him earlier. And that's one fucking tough scene. Imagine you get killed in the Skyrim Civil War, and you go to Warrior Heaven, only to get your soul eaten by the world's evilest looking dragon. God damn, that's rough. We reach Shor's Hall, and I whack around Soon here a bit to prove my worth, and I enter the Hall of Valor to find some pretty famous people. Ysgramor himself, Jurgen Windcaller, and the 3 Nord heroes I saw during my Elder Scrolls movie session. And I really wish we could just talk to these characters and ask them what it was like to be them. What it's like to lead the 500 companions in their conquest of Skyrim, what it was like to get crushed by Nerevar and Dumak at Red Mountain, or anything similar to that at all. But unfortunately,
This is Skyrim.
famous heroes ain't got shit to say beyond some blurb dialogue, missing a golden opportunity for some fun and interesting lore. I mean, Shor is the Nordic version of Lorkhan, the owner of the heart that we were going pinata mode on at the end of Morrowind. And we're visiting his house, and we learn nothing about him, or the Nordic religion, or the super famous people he's got living in his halls. God damn it, man.
Yeah, Sovngarde is so underutilized, it's not even funny.
Regardless, we gotta end this Alduin chicanery for good. So we recruit the 3 heroes and move out to face Alduin. And all of this fight has some pretty insane setup, fighting alongside the same Nordic heroes who banished Alduin to the future, and the Nordic version of Valhalla. The fight itself is extremely disappointing, just being round 2 of the Throw of the World fight with Alduin. Only this time we have 3 NPCs backing us up to make the fight even easier. And soon enough, we whack Alduin so hard he fucking explodes into bones and black soul goop, and dies for real this time. Huh. It's pretty easy. We get some cheers and fan.
Okay, but why don't you get to absorb his soul? That's also a big question. Why don't you get to absorb Alduin's soul? Which is probably answered somewhere. I just need to find it.
The local Sovngardians, and soon sends us back to Tamriel, which finishes Skyrim's main quest. Overall, this main quest has a lot of great moments, like meeting Parthi, discovering Blackreach, and going into heaven to kill a dragon like it's some epic Chinese folktale.
It has no redeeming qualities, though.
But the story itself is pretty undercooked and is a bit drawn out, with a solid amount of boring, unskippable dialogue sequences like that damn war council, and the story itself is very linear and railroad.
I think it's kind of telling that he thinks the dialogue itself is the problem, or that it's unskippable. Maybe he doesn't. Maybe that's not exactly what he thinks, but it makes it seem like it's just because it's unskippable dialogue that he can't be bothered to sit through it. Maybe that's just me being what's it called? Not reading. Maybe that's me just reading into it wrong, or interpreting it in bad faith. But that's how it sounds.
And the Dragonborn has very little agency, as you mostly watch other characters talk and come up with plans that you do all the actual work for. Being a Dragonborn works very well for the game and its mechanics, but story-wise, I feel less like a hero and the world's greatest order follower. Our main opposition, the dragons, have their own language, cultures, and hierarchies, but the aspects
And none of which, except the language, is actually seen in the game.
of dragon society are not expanded upon in any deep or meaningful ways, and they just end up feeling like evil flying lizards, rather than the noble forces of nature they want to be portrayed as. Alduin fails to be anything beyond a cool-looking dragon that wants to destroy the world because it's his destiny or whatever, and the whole lore about the dragon priests, the dragon cult who used to rule Skyrim, the dragon war that removed the dragons until now, and the fact that the Draugr are the remaining servants of the dragon cult also feels underdeveloped and rather shoehorned into the overarching lore of the series. And we don't know much at all about this ancient dragon society beyond that dragons used to rule the land with their might, subjugated humans and used their priests to control them, and were eventually wiped out after Alduin's initial defeat. But story issues aside, the main quest still manages to be overall enjoyable, with the previously mentioned moments alongside some more unique missions like breaking into the Thalmor embassy, flying on a dragon's back to Skuldafn, some solid dungeon crawls to bolster it. I mean, I've probably done this main quest like 5 times by now, and I don't play something 5 times unless I enjoy it just a little bit.
That's insane. I barely got through the first time playing it. 5 times? No way, dude.
But of course, that's not all to base Skyrim. On top of a shit ton of side quests and danger quests, there's of course several factions with quest lines unto themselves. Those being the Companions, the College of Winterhold, the Thieves Guild, the Dark Brotherhood, and the Civil War. Like my Oblivion video, I won't go into detail about the factions, and I'll talk in more broad strokes. So first up, we got the Companions.
But wait. So you're just gonna go through the main quest and then just not talk about Sky? I mean, the side quests and, you know, the factions and stuff, it's basically most of Skyrim, right? I mean, you can't just do the main story and then go, okay, that's it lore-wise or story-wise. I mean, most of the good stories, almost all of the good stories, are in the side content. That's insane.
Skyrim's Fighters Guild. The Companions are the current incarnation of the original 500 Companions of Ysgramor, who built their guild hall out of one of the boats used during their crossing from Atmora to Skyrim. What first appears to be your typical warrior faction eventually turns out to be a secret group of werewolves, in the main way to unlock the werewolf form. However, this cool setup is bogged down by probably the most underdeveloped faction in Elder Scrolls history, the Silver Hand, a group of werewolf hunters who come out of the actual woodwork to be the main oppositions to the Companions. Nobody outside this questline even mentions them, and then they immediately vanish from the world once you complete the questline. I did enjoy the quest of cleansing Kodlak's soul so you can go to Sovngarde instead of being Hersine's bottom bitch for all eternity, and you gotta decapitate some hag ravens to get that done. And it's pretty cool. But overall, it's a cool setup that's let down by an undercooked story and some unengaging dungeon delves. Sounds familiar. Next up is the College of Winterhold. Skyrim has no official name.
Wow, that was a short section on the Companions.
As Nords aren't super keen on using magic. It follows in Oblivion's footsteps by being available to any character to complete regardless of magical aptitude. And I'm pretty sure you can complete the entire questline by casting under 5 spells. Its plot revolves around the discovery of the Eye of Magnus, an artifact of a mysterious god who is claimed to be the source of all magic on Tamriel. And you eventually get betrayed by the one and only Thalmor character in the college, shocker, and both the Archmage and his second-in-command get killed. But their deaths lack any real impact, as we barely know or care about these characters, and it culminates in a trip to Labyrinthian, a huge-ass Nordic dungeon with a dragon priest loitering in its depths. It's pretty straightforward and weirdly magically removed, and ultimately suffers for it. The Thieves Guild has an interesting hook about trying to restore the guild to its former glory, and to solve the guild's several years-long run of bad luck. It'll have you doing some fun thief and thug activities like forging records, pressing shop owners for protection money, and plain old swiping shit. And its plot eventually reveals a decade-long conspiracy by the guild's current leader to steal from and sabotage the guild from the inside. Although the story suffers from the typical Bethesda underdevelopment and lack of memorable characters. but I still really enjoyed infiltrating Mercer's house, Golden Glow Estate, and a Dwemer museum. And the final mission where we fight Mercer before a massive snow elf statue is a pretty sick battle setting. And this faction probably adheres most to its class, as all these areas can be snuck through. Although it does reach its limits at times when you enter the Dwemer Museum offices to find that they are guarded by a separate guard faction to the city guards, so you don't have to get a massive bounty on your head for killing 10 guards. But overall, it's a pretty solid faction. The Dark Brotherhood probably has the most narratively entertaining quest, if a bit cheesy with the vampire kid and sassy ass Nazir. But it has a lot of fun and creepy moments like when you have to eavesdrop on Cicero in the Night Mother's tomb, and her dried out corpse starts talking to you. And this shit used to give me the heebie-jeebies as a kid. There's plenty of assassination contracts to do too, and the main quest line of preparing to kill the Emperor himself is a great story hook. And the destruction of the Dark Brotherhood Sanctuary by the Penitus Oculatus is still a pretty memorable moment for me, especially when we find extra crispy Astrid.
Yeah.
Damn, she's cooked. I always have fun with this faction. Stealthily murdering Elder Scrolls NPCs for money is never not fun, and the set of quests to kill the Emperor are varied and mostly interesting, despite the lack of memorable characters outside of Cicero, Todd's little clowny fuck. And finally, we got the Civil War, which is probably the weakest faction in the game. You can either choose to fight for the Empire or the Stormcloaks, and the game does manage to make it a pretty tough choice for the average player. Do you want to join the Empire to quell Skyrim and strengthen what's left of this desperate confederation? Or join the Stormcloaks to fully defy the Empire and return rule of the place back into Nordic hands? All the while wondering if the side you're supporting is secretly the preferred option of the truly greater threat of the Thalmor? It poses an interesting question that's been argued to hell and back by fans over the years, and is one of the rare times where Skyrim's writing actually makes you think and weigh your options, which I commend. But outside of the interesting premise, the Civil War is an underdeveloped string of battles and fort capturings until it's time to siege the Ops capital, and this is mostly due to development constraints, as each city was supposed to have a big siege battle, but that was cut down to just Whiterun in either Windhelm or Solitude, and was replaced by generic fort battles to make up for these cuts. Outside of the big battles, which are pretty impressive for this undead chimera of a program we call the Creation Engine, there's not much to write home about here, and that's all the factions.
That was a very underwhelming explanation of the Civil War. Actually, I wonder, so Ulfric went to the king and kind of just, challenged him to a duel for his seat, I guess. Why can't we, even if we play as a Nord, why can't we do the same with Ulfric? We don't even have the option to try, right? I don't know, just something to think about. Is it because Bethesda wants us to go through the entire quest line? Maybe.
Of course, Skyrim has 3 DLC packs to go along with it as well, those being Dawnguard, Dragonborn, and Hearthfire. I'll talk about Hearthfire quick, as it isn't an expansion, rather a house building mode to build that Lakeview Manor of your dreams. And it's pretty inconsequential, but I enjoy building up the houses with the required materials, and the decorations and structures look pretty nice. It's a great pickup if you're really into player homes in these types of games. But our first real DLC is Dawnguard, which is more of an extension than an expansion, much like Knights of the Nine or Tribunal. But we will soon see that Dawnguard has a lot more to offer beyond its initial impressions. Dawnguard starts when you either hear a rumor from a guard about the Dawnguard being reformed, or you encounter a vampire attack in a major city, and then get recruited by a Dawnguard orc. Once alerted to their existence, we gotta head to the Reach and enter a cave to reach Fort Dawnguard, which is in the scenic Dayspring.
I'm very uninterested in this part. Let's skip to Dragonborn.
Dragonborn starts when you get approached and jumped by cultists working for someone named Mirak, while in a town or village after progressing the main quest past the Way of the Voice quest. Once you kill them, you can find a note on their bodies telling you to travel to Solstheim, which we can reach by taking a boat out of Windhelm, but you gotta intimidate the boat captain first. We get a classic Bethesda pull into port from a boat scene, and we hop off to find that Solstheim.
Is that really classic?
Changes in the last 200 years since Blood Moon. Raven Rock has been reestablished as a seat of House Redoran, and it has their distinct shell-style buildings and guards wearing bold mole armor. It all looks fantastic.
This entire place is just, hey guys, remember Morrowind? Remember playing a better game?
Fantastic with modern style and graphics. And on top of that, most of the tracks that play are the classic Morrowind soundtrack songs, and it's enough to stiffen the spear of any Morrow boomer. The south of the island is now also covered in ash from Red Mountain, which we can see off in the distance. Good times. Solstheim is now a part of Morrowind, as the Empire said fuck this place after the Red Year, and Fort Frostmoth is now an ash-covered ruin. However, it seems that the threat of this Mirak guy is slowly taking over the island, as he mind-dominates anyone who gets close to the Standing Stones and forces them to build temples for him. We talk to the Redoran Major Domo here, who can't seem to remember who Mirak is, but he tells us to go check out his massive temple in the center of the island. We head there, and if you touch the stone in the center, you get mind-dominated and wake up chiseling a temple pillar. It's a pretty cool little detail. We meet Freya, a Skull warrior lady who came here for the same reason as we did, and we recruit her to help us clear out Mirak's temple and see what's going on here. We fight through a pretty thick dungeon of Draugr and cultists until we reach the end, where we find a suspiciously thick black book. Reading the book causes me to get transported to the realm of Little Apocrypha, the eldritch library of the Daedra god of fate and forbidden knowledge, Hermaeus Mora. Mirak had made a deal to become Mora's champion in return for powerful dragon shouts, such as the ability to bend will. We come face to face with Mirak in an army of Lovecraftian squid-faced seekers lording over us, and he flexes his dragon aspect, tells us that he is the first dragonborn, and that he will soon make his return to, take over the world and other such villainous shit. But instead of offing the only person who could possibly challenge his return while he's got us bent over, he instead sends us back to Tamriel to tease us. We wake back up and talk to Freya, who tells us that we should go consult her father, who's the skull.
Oh wait, they literally just kill you there, so that you'll get sent back out. They couldn't even bother to make it like a special script or something.
Current shaman on what to do next. We head back.
I mean, it's probably special, but like soon kind of just pushes you out of Sovngarde or teleports you or whatever. Yet the enemies inside Apocrypha there just kind of blast you with their normal attacks. And then you're sent back out since your HP reaches 0. Kind of.
The Skull Village. We talk to Storn, who tells us to go learn the first word of the shout Mirak is using to control people, and to use it on the stones to free the brainwashed workers. We learn the first word of Ben Will, and while you're out exploring, any dragons you kill will have their souls stolen by Mirak. Just wait, you damn bitbiter. Once we have the shout, we can use it to cleanse all the stones like we did in Bloodmoon. But instead of following the skull story of Avar's Stonesinger to complete several trials to cleanse them, we just need to shout out the rocks and kill the lurker who will spawn in to attack us. The lurkers and seekers have some great fishy and Lovecraftian designs, even though the lurker is essentially a giant with an added tentacle puke attack. So we cleanse all the stones and kill the lurkers. And once that's done, we can return to Storm, who tells us that he's not sure where the rest of the black books are, and to talk to Neloth to learn more. Yep, the same Neloth from Morrowind, who looks better than ever after 200 years. He's got a sweet new goatee and he looks as vital as ever. Damn, what's your diet and routine? Put me on, big bro. And we can find him at his new home of Tel Mithrin. And since we have no levitation abilities, we have to take the magical elevator to reach his chambers.
Which the fucking mages would never implement ever, by the way.
We speak to Neloth, who has a lead on a black book in a nearby Dwemer ruin, but he needs our help to get to it. We get past some beefy-ass reavers, aka the Soul Slime Bandits, and we enter the ruin. To get the black book, we need to gather up 4 Dwemer power cubes and use them to activate the 4 receptacles in the next room, when we can raise and lower the water level to progress. And this dungeon is wholly tied to this raising and lowering water puzzle, and you have to constantly place and move cubes between
I actually kind of like this part,
pylons and rooms to get everything you need.
even though it's still just a railroad throughout the whole entire thing. I kind of like it.
It's by no means a difficult puzzle, but it'll take some time for you to complete as you're playing around with the water levels and grabbing and placing cubes to progress. And it doesn't completely hold your hand or put the answer right in front of your face, which for Skyrim is kind of a big deal. I appreciate a lot. But once we get all the cubes and put them in their place, we get the book and take another trip back to Apocrypha. We talk to the world's biggest hentai fan himself, Hermaeus Mora, and we head on in. I've always loved how Apocrypha looks. Bethesda loves to go nuts on Lovecraftian themes and designs, and this is no different. It's a gothic, twisted library with green skies and a goopy green ocean surrounding it. And the moving platforms and hallways are really trippy, and it really makes the realm feel truly warped and almost non-Euclidean. The theming of books and knowledge are conveyed very clearly, with book pages flying all around and being all over the floor, and the structures of Apocrypha being made of stacked up books is a really nice detail. And most of the minor loot in here being random in-game books is a touch I've always really enjoyed. Apocrypha only really has 2 enemy types, the lurkers and the seekers, and the seekers are a pain in the ass. They can disappear, cast strong magic, and can spawn a clone of themselves to fight with. And they can take some pretty solid punishment. But getting killed in Apocrypha is no big deal, as you just get spit back out to Tamriel, and when you reread the book, you can start pretty much right where you left off. So that's nice. But Apocrypha isn't an open area like the Soul Cairn or the Forgotten Vale, and it's more of a new type of dungeon, as each trip to Apocrypha has you reaching the end, and then picking one of the 3 passive skill rewards for completing the Black Book. And there's 7 Black Books in this expansion, giving you plenty of Apocrypha to work with. But like another Daedra God's realm, even Apocrypha gets a bit samey and repetitive after the first few books, and I usually find the main quest gives more than enough Apocrypha to work with. But once we travel through all the chapters and reach the end of the book, Mora teaches us the second word of Ben Will, and he says he'll teach us the third.
Ben who?
Exchange for Skull secrets. Knowledge for knowledge. We return to Storm and tell him the news. Look, buddy, I'm gonna need you to get violated by a demonic tentacle cloud so I can fully learn Ben Will. I know it's a tough scene, but it's the only way. Storm says something along the lines of, okay, fine, and he summons Mora, who immediately impales Storm, sucks his knowledge right out of his body, and teaches me the final word of Ben Will before dipping, leaving Storm dead as a doornail on the ground. Well, I didn't think he'd do all that tentacle shit. My bad. Freya is traumatized by the loss of her father, and she tells me to go and kill Mirak. And feeling guilty for condemning this guy to die an extremely crass death in front of his entire clan, I go to face Mirak right away. It's another pretty standard Apocrypha clearing, but we gotta grab these 4 books and do a bit of an esoteric picture match puzzle, matching the titles of the books to the image on the stands. Damn. Even the Daedric god of knowledge can't even come up with anything more complex than a picture match puzzle. It's like an epidemic. Once that's done, we're then approached by a
Truly.
suspiciously smooth dragon, and we use our completed Ben Will shout to turn him to our side. And we can even now hop on his back and ride him. But don't get too excited. Whipping the dragon isn't as cool as you'd think. Dragons fly completely on their own using their AI, and when engaging in combat you can either only cast spells, which glitched out for me, as I was unable to equip my spell hands, or command the dragon to use breath attacks on the enemy they're locked onto. Having the dragons not fully controllable is like that one gif of that guy looking at his empty fridge, and the mechanic itself is not very useful outside being a fun novelty. But we finally fly.
Oh, great. We're having loading issues again. Awesome. It just works. I feel like I've seen enough, honestly. Let's try to skip to the end. The summary. It just works. Yeah. No. I don't quite agree with that. I mean, again, as Rasputin said, I think it's Skyrim kind of does everything, which is why it feels like a unique experience. But then it's like you can play any of its contemporaries and get a better experience in one aspect of the game.
Complaining, critiquing, moaning out of the way. What are we left with?
Well, let's degrade the quality a bit. I swear to God.
You know Todd's famous line, "It just works"? I know it's been mean to hell and back, and even Todd himself exists as almost a living meme at this point. He's more myth than man. And when I say this, I sincerely mean it. Despite all of Skyrim's issues, its dumbed down progression, its removal of the series' RPG elements and attributes, its simplified mechanics and combat, its shallow characters and underdeveloped stories, and the removal...
Yeah, I kind of get what he's saying. So, I think that's going to be it for that video. I guess I got some stuff out of it. Even just like, if it was just ideas from stuff I can research more. I guess it's been okay. But yeah. So let's do the other one, which is it doesn't get better than Skyrim, right? It doesn't get better than Skyrim. another very... This is a very positive video, it seems like. But hopefully we'll get something out of it. This has been seen like 1.8 million times. That's actually kind of impressive. So, for a little palate cleanser, let's go for this short video by Caleb A. Robinson. I guess I should add.
How many hours have you spent in this world? Just trekking through the land and soaking in the music, the distant mountains, the villagers going about their days, the wildlife, the sky, or throwing on your combat gear and crushing draugrs, shooting down dragons and smashing through bandit camps. How many different builds have you played? The stealthy thief, the unkillable tank, the overpowered mage, the archer assassin who's secretly a family man with 4 adopted kids waiting for him at home? Zooming out a little to reality, think of all...
I'm back. What did I miss? Not much. More YouTube trouble, but well, we just started a new video here. It doesn't get better than Skyrim by Caleb A. Robinson. Other than that, I don't know. Just kind of started repeating himself and just went into full recap mode. So I was like, I've seen enough.
All the times you've booted this game up on
Also, welcome back.
consoles during different seasons of life. Maybe after your high school band performance, as a break during an all-nighter in college, before the kids wake up in the morning, or at the end of a long day at work. This game is over a decade old, and yet there's a chance you've played it within the last few years. For many of us, it's a staple that never leaves for long. It reemerges like an evening tide that strikes the shores of our lives and pulls us out to familiar waters. In case that cheesy analogy didn't make it obvious enough, I'll go ahead and say it. Skyrim is my favorite game. I've had a lot of fun playing other games like The Witcher 3, The Shadow of the Tomb Raider, Minecraft, Assassin's Creed, and NBA 2K. But none of these games have ever quite managed to take hold of me like Skyrim.
Basically all mainstream. I mean, not that there's anything wrong with that. Just keep it in your keep it in the back of your head.
And I need to know why. So I've spent the last 2 months replaying the game, talking to my friends about it, reading blogs, and watching interviews with the devs to answer this question. After 10 years, why haven't I stopped playing this game? And maybe more importantly, why haven't I been able to enjoy any other games as much as Skyrim?
I mean, from what he brought up, the answer is pretty obvious. But let's give him the benefit of the doubt.
When I asked my friends why they play Skyrim after all these years, many of them talked about the immersion. Between the beautiful landscape, the abundance of conversible NPCs, the random events, hidden quests and locations, NPC schedules, lore books and scrolls, the different guilds to join, and one of the best music scores ever, it's no wonder why. To me, Skyrim feels like a real place that exists long before I open up the game and continues to exist even if I'm not playing at the moment. If you start wandering the world, it won't be long before you stumble across an NPC with some unique dialogue and a miscellaneous task, maybe a letter to deliver. Along the way, some bandits might attack you, and you're suddenly in the fight of your life. Luckily, you're a pro and you take them on like a champ. Maybe a few other random events befall you, but eventually you deliver the letter. The second NPC thanks you, then a dragon attacks. Well, now you have to kill this dragon quickly, or the non-essential NPC you just helped is going to die.
I guess some things never change.
Each of us has countless stories.
Who cares?
Getting distracted by a side quest, a unique location, or just a really tall mountain we want to get to the top of. Skyrim is meant to pull you in and gives you organic adventures at every turn.
Also, if he wasn't an essential NPC, then the quest is basically just throwaway. A letter? That's probably like a Radiant quest, isn't it? Ugh.
I know I'm starting with some of the more obvious parts of this game, but don't worry, we'll dive deeper as we go. We first have to lay a strong foundation.
I mean, I'm sure Radiant Quests has, a place. But for the most part, they're kind of bad.
Because without these qualities, nothing else in the game would matter. We'll be quick so we can get to the real meat of the video. The sheer size of this game enables players to sink hundreds or even thousands of hours into it. There are 300 plus quests, dozens of playstyles, over 400 named locations, not to mention the hundreds of unnamed places that are still being discovered to this day, over 1,000 unique NPCs, 66 different options for a spouse, depending on your taste. One of the best parts of this game is just wandering. It's so fun to explore until you find a new place and...
Beauty comes from the inside?
delve into whatever secrets the devs left behind. Maybe you'll uncover a quest you've never encountered, or an item worth displaying in your house. You just never know, and I love that sense of discovery. Skyrim manages to have a massive amount of things to do, while still keeping the quality of these things at a maximum. On my recent playthrough, I heard a noise that's been bothering me for like years. This extremely annoying ringing, of which I've never been able to find the source. Determined to learn the answer once and for all, I tracked it down to this stupid plant. I almost couldn't believe it when the noise stopped. How had I never found this before? Maybe that was something you uncovered like an hour into your experience.
Because you're not... Maybe because you're playing with the sound off. That has to be it.
For not knowing about this before. The point is, there are countless things to do and explore, and each person's experience is unique because of it. There's always a new path to take, a new playstyle to invent, and a new adventure to seek. After hearing my friends bring up both the breadth of content and the immersive experience, I asked them, couldn't you get that same experience from GTA? The response was, maybe, but this is fantasy. Which is exactly how I would answer the same question. Skyrim is not only a quality open world, but a quality fantasy open world, and that makes all the difference. Sure, I can blow things up in GTA or skydive onto unsuspecting pedestrians, but can I ride a dragon, or craft my armor from its bones?
You can't ride a dragon in Skyrim.
Can I join a guild of the land's most fierce assassins? Can I pointlessly push wood through a sawmill? Not everyone who loves Skyrim is a fantasy nerd, but for those of us that are, this game is pure gold.
Seriously? No, as like someone who enjoys fantasy, the dragons are a total letdown. And also, it's kind of not fantasy enough.
Everyone who's played the game knows exactly what I mean by the Skyrim ambience. That perfect combination of music, the skybox, visual effects, and the atmosphere is nothing short of therapeutic. And while this ambience certainly makes me nostalgic, I think it's a disservice to say
I mean, fucking Skyrim has like almost no magic, like canonically. The mages at the college are looked upon as Daira worshippers. Like something bad, they're kind of shunned. Maybe it's low fantasy, but then again, dragons.
Nostalgia is the only reason, or even the main reason, so many people come back to Skyrim. But it is an important piece of the picture. Life has a tendency to become more and more complicated. It seems like the level of stress and commitment and responsibility increases pretty steadily until you're retired. So anyone who played Skyrim when it first came out likely played it at a simpler time of their life. It personally reminds me of staying up late in my first college dorm to play it on an Xbox 360 my roommate found outside of a dumpster. For you, maybe it was a friend's house, and you didn't even mind watching him play because it was so entrancing. Maybe it was the first RPG you ever encountered, and you were hooked instantly. Back then you didn't have student loans or bills, so you could just play from the moment you got home until your parents told you to go outside and stop staring at the TV. Skyrim is infused with the memories of our lives before, of simpler times. There's nothing wrong with that, even if some people say that these memories are rose-colored glasses that blot out the flaws of the game. But to them, I ask this question. If nostalgia is the only thing bringing us back to Skyrim, wouldn't we be revisiting all of our games from the past?
I kinda am. Like, I like revisiting old games. Maybe even more than playing new games. Well, it kind of depends on the mood, but like, there's something about the comfort of going back to something you know, right? And even if the game is bad, that comfort is still there.
Is that Skyrim has an incredibly diverse game loop that allows for almost endless progression without ever feeling grindy. I've played my share of
That's bullshit.
Assassin's Creed games, and it almost always ends the same. I get the game on sale, the story sucks me in, and I play nonstop for an afternoon or evening. I really enjoy these game worlds, especially Origins and Odyssey, and exploring usually lasts me the next few days. I level up here and there, doing side quests that interest me and diving into every conveniently placed hay bale I can find. Then I return to the main quest for a while. Sometime around this point, there comes a moment where the main quest has a recommended level way higher than my own. It stops me dead in my tracks every time. Suddenly, the game goes from an engaging, plot-driven story with fun gameplay and lots of side content, to a grindy sludge where I'm forced to engage with a bunch of fetch quests before I can return to the part of the game I actually want to play. I might keep at it for a bit, maybe getting a bit farther into the story before slowly fizzling out over the next couple of weeks. A month later, and I end up deleting the game to make room for Placid Plastic Duck Simulator.
You are a placid plastic duck.
The same thing happens with NBA 2K and even Minecraft. Whether it's participating in annoying team drills between games to get badges, or spending countless hours mining cobblestone in survival mode, I always hit a point where the grind surpasses the reward. I'm not saying these games are bad. I enjoy them and I appreciate them for what they are. But there's no denying that they become repetitive or they restrict your freedom. Often both. Listen to this quote from Joel Burgess, one of the lead level designers for Skyrim. Side content is meaningful because you can miss it. Assassin's Creed has side content that's extremely fun.
That doesn't apply to Skyrim. Well, I mean, you can miss it, but you can't miss it, right?
Until they force you to engage with it, making it main content you can't miss if you want to finish the game. Skyrim doesn't have this problem. It's not interested in making you pointlessly engage in activities to collect resources or level up. The game scales with your level, meaning you can finish the main quest without ever veering off course, or beat it 1,000 hours into a build and still have a great experience either way. Some people might argue that dungeons are a grind, but I'd disagree. To me, a grind is engaging in repetitive or obnoxious activity in order to progress in the game. I enjoy combat enough that
Like dungeons.
it never feels like a chore to clear a mine or a tomb. The level design keeps things interesting, especially since I'm the type of player that likes to look into every nook and cranny. I hate it when I reach the end of a dungeon and I know in the back of my mind that there was one path I missed because I thought I was taking the side route first and plan on coming back.
Luckily, you won't have that experience with Skyrim because it's all one straight path.
But the side route turned out to be the main route, and now I'll never find out what was back there. At the end, you almost always get something worthwhile, whether that's a new word to a shout, a best-in-slot item, or gear you can sell off to a merchant for cash. And best of all, the dungeons have nice exits or loops, so you don't ever have to backtrack. Even if you don't enjoy all that, the great thing is, you don't ever have to enter a dungeon if you don't want to. Just explore the cities, the towns.
Yeah, all the fucking caves in the world have, like, you know, a conveniently placed hole in them that leads back to the main chamber. I mean, it just kind of takes you out of the experience. If it's man-made, then fine. But natural caves, no.
The mountains, the sea, the college, anything you want. The parts of the game that can be considered a grind, like a certain quest to obtain unusual gems, are optional. They often offer decent rewards, and honestly, they're a lot of fun for some people. The point is, thanks to its broad gameplay loop, Skyrim is not the type of game you get burnt out playing. Tired of going through the dwarven mines collecting cogs to melt down so you can hit max smithing? Go build a sick house and fill it with gear you've collected. Done with quests for a while? Maybe you'd fancy becoming a werewolf. I'm not saying I hate grindy games. I love Minecraft, and the reason I play survival mode is because collecting the resources to build something epic makes it all the more rewarding when I finish.
Oh my god, has he not made stairs on that?
Creed makes you feel like a demigod when you encounter a low-level boss after returning from a leveling up session, but eventually, these games burn their players out. Invariably, I will put the controller away because the game has become more like a job than a relaxing pastime. The only reason I ever stopped playing Skyrim is because I feel like I've done everything I've wanted to, for now. Last time I stopped because I completed every major quest line, including the DLCs. This time, I'll probably stop playing when I run out of new locations to discover. Or not. Who knows? Maybe I'll get inspired to lock myself in Whiterun and try to max my skills. Play it like Iron Man mode in RuneScape, or beat the entire game using only a fork. Probably not, but these are just a few of the countless challenges out there. Skyrim is a game that lets you do whatever you want without forcing you to engage in any one thing.
But, like, you can literally do that in any other game, too. It's not unique to Skyrim. You can play fucking RuneScape with a fork if you want to. It's not a strength of Skyrim. And it feels so weird that people bring this up. Like this kind of stuff.
Half of the people I've talked to for this video have sunk hundreds of hours into the game without ever even finishing the main story. That was like the first thing I did. This game lets you do what you want, when you want to, no matter how little or how much time you've already played. So let's do a 180. Skyrim doesn't railroad players into a certain playstyle or into certain regions.
It does. It railroads you into fucking ranged assassin build, it's like sneak ranger, whatever it's called, because that's basically just the most optimal way to play.
However, it does give you a clear path for leveling up your character, advancing the storyline, and exploring the world. As I mentioned before, I've played a lot of achievement or level-driven games, and there's a reason I love them, even if I do get burnt out. Man, when that sweet dopamine hits as your progress bar moves up and the numbers get bigger, I'm like a lab rat with a meth lever. Without these systems in place, games can often feel pointless to me. I've spent a lot of time building things in Minecraft. I've explored hundreds of caves, built dozens of bases, and deep dived into redstone creation mumbo-jumbo style. But I usually stop playing after thinking, what's next? Sometimes having your imagination be the limit can be, well, limiting. Skyrim's not going to spoon-feed you content, but there's always an obvious way to progress the game.
I think that's exactly what Skyrim does. Like with the raiding quests and all the caves that just pop up everywhere. I think that's spoon feeding.
The perk system allows for a wide range of builds. It forces you to make conscious decisions.
Not really. You can just choose all the perks.
About the type of character you want to play. It gives you something to work toward, and later on down the road when you've settled into a rhythm, the quick dragon kills and dungeon clears feel like the results of careful decision making and not just the game taking it easy on you. Shouts are a great way of adding another layer of magic to all combat types. They can turn the tide of a battle and make you feel like an absolute beast. Not to mention the pure joy of Fusro-dying Lydia into oblivion.
Poor Lydia. What did she ever do
There's
to
so many
you?
Shouts out there, and they give you reason to delve into dungeons and to scour the lands for dragons. There's something so refreshing about the sound of capturing a dragon soul and unlocking a shout. Even exploration is part of the progression. Once you get close enough to a named location, it shows up on your map so you can get to it. After you've explored it, you can come back anytime via fast travel. The game keeps track of dungeons you've cleared so you don't have to repeat content. It all works together to give you a sense of accomplishment in the natural course of the game. Quests are simple to follow, so you don't need to pull up a wiki. I'm looking at you, old school RuneScape. And you can easily switch between them or stop paying attention altogether. Something I don't see mentioned often enough is the balance of the quest's interconnectedness. If quests are too interconnected and rely on the completion of prior quests, that severely limits the player's agency. Not to mention that each choice introduced into a quest makes it exponentially more difficult for the devs. Imagine if there were 16 more quests after Civil War finished. That's 16 quests you have to write, taking into account the fact that the player could have picked either the Stormcloaks or the Imperials. Now imagine that every 4 quests, another major choice is introduced, doubling the number of paths and the amount of content needed.
Wait, what is this?
You have 2 by 2 by 16
What's
more. Thing I don't see mentioned often
what's this argument?
enough is the balance of the quest's interconnectedness. If quests are too interconnected and rely on the completion of prior quests, that severely limits the player's agency. Not to mention that each choice introduced into a quest makes it exponentially more difficult for the devs. Imagine if there were 16 more quests after Civil War finished. That's 16 quests you have to write, taking into account the fact that the player could have picked either the Stormcloaks or the Imperials. Now imagine that every 4 quests, another major choice is introduced, doubling the number of paths and the amount of content needed. By the end of the 16 quests, you have 2 by 2 by 2 by 2 multiplied by the 2 Civil War endings, which is 32 total endings if my math is correct. As you can see, things quickly get out of hand.
What? No, but God forbid you make a quest system that has choices in an RPG, right? But you don't necessarily need them to resolve differently in the end. Maybe not like the ending itself, but like your decisions and what happens throughout the quest should have some influence on the path you take. You don't necessarily have to have unique endings for each path. But like say failing to retrieve something would have you go and go back and get the item. If you're not fast enough, someone else steals it before you. So instead of being able to retrieve it faster, or if you're not able to retrieve it fast, you need to go and get it from the people who stole it. Instead of having that be one linear path, you can like with the horn of Jurgen Windcaller, right? Instead of you could have just gone and retrieved the horn and then find the blades some other way. But like those are two separate endings to a single quest that could easily loop into the main path again. I don't know if I'm explaining this sufficiently, but like at least you have the illusion that the world is alive and stuff is happening without the input from the player. It also gives you more of a reason to replay the main quest in this case. I guess it's at least how I would change it. Well, one of the aspects of the main quest at least. It's not really illusion of choice either. It's all about what the player does. I don't know. You're gonna have to organize more of my thoughts around that, but something along those lines, I think.
Sure, you can weave choices back into a common thread, or just have fewer major decisions.
Oh, he literally just said what I said.
But then the player feels like they're having less of an impact. Even if you don't have...
No, but that's the impact. If you fail something, there are consequences for it. In Skyrim, because the quest line is so linear, you can't actually fail anything. Even during the peace council, you can't fail to bring peace between the two factions of the Civil War. It's just impossible. No matter how unfair your choices are in the meeting. Like, just imagine if you weren't able to use Dragon's Reach to capture Odoving. You would have to go about capturing him another way. And then he'd fly you to Soundguard. I mean, it's not really that hard. But the insistence on having this linear quest path is kind of what creates these situations where you can't fail, no matter how hard you try. And I tried. I really did.
Any choices. Creating 16 direct quests limits how many the player has access to. You can't start part 14 without doing the other 13. However, if you split that into 4 separate quest lines, you now have 4 options for the player to choose from instead of just doing one after the other. The opposite end of the spectrum is probably worse. From a developmental standpoint, it's simpler to have hundreds of one-off quests that don't have any prerequisites. You can add 4 endings to every quest without having it trickle down to any others. But this comes at the cost of a potentially disjointed experience where there are no long-term stakes, cohesive storylines, or dynamic characters. Skyrim balances this well by having several long, loosely connected storylines that span multiple entries, locations, and characters. You have the main quest, the Companions, the Thieves Guild, the Dark Brotherhood, Dawnguard, Dragonborn, the College of Winterhold, the Civil War, the Daedric quests, and more. There are big decisions along the way that will carry weight and affect that particular storyline, but those decisions rarely shut you out from other content since they're usually made near the end. Because of the large number of quest lines as well as a massive catalog of one-offs, players can find quests anywhere they look, even if they haven't done a ton of prerequisites. All that to say, Skyrim has a remarkably broad and balanced range of quests, which make progression natural and engaging.
Marvelous.
What?
The level as you play system the Elder Scrolls games are known for makes every aspect of the game rewarding. An interconnected economy and skilling system give the player clear direction for gear and result in satisfying upgrades.
There's really not much of an economy in the Skyrim. I mean, for it to be realistic, you could buy something in one town, then go to another town and sell it for either less or more. I'm not completely sure if this is the case, but I don't think it is, from what I've seen so far.
Even without exploits that give you a carrying capacity of 585.
Like, there's almost impossible to roleplay as a merchant, a traveling merchant, for example. Just like it's impossible to roleplay as a bard, even though there's a bard's college.
1,357. Overall, this game knows how to incentivize its players organically with gratifying rewards, and that sense of accomplishment goes a long way to make the game feel less like an empty world and more like a place of endless possibility. It's kind of crazy how much stuff you can interact with in Skyrim. Most of us already have an inventory full of mostly useless crap by the time we exit Helgen. I mean, who could resist all that free stuff lying around? It shows you the value right there. I'm definitely going to use all the food and candlesticks and bone meal I'm collecting, right? But seriously, Skyrim lets you pick up, like, everything. Even things that seem decorative can often be cut down or fusrodad away, like this dangling dead skeever. The devs referred to adding all these items as cluttering the world, but I prefer the term populating. It makes the game feel lived in. You can pick plants and take animal hides for crafting gear or brewing potions. And if you're like me and can't be bothered to make a single potion, you can always sell the materials to Belethor. Because in Skyrim,
Everything's for sale, my friend. Everything.
it's not just the items that provide lots of options to interact, the NPCs are also highly engaging. Sure, some of them spout the same quotes at you every time, but I appreciate that everyone will stop and talk to you. Most of them have multiple dialogue options, and even the ones that don't will at least say something before moving on.
Do you get to the Cloud District very often? Oh, what am I saying? Of course you don't.
This may seem trivial to longtime players, especially since we have most of those lines memorized by now, but when you play a game that lacks the same level of integration, it becomes painfully obvious. Take Harry Potter Legacy, for example. A great game in general from what I hear, but a big complaint I hear is that you can't really talk much to other students. It's a jarring experience. Skyrim spoiled us by giving us a vibrant world full of characters that are just...
Okay, so what would you rather be doing? Trying to talk to people who will answer you, but being unable to ask them specific things. Like, for example, I found this unusual gem, right? And then it's a misc quest that where you need to find someone to appraise it or tell you what it is. It's an unusual gem. But then when I try to ask anyone about it, I don't even get the option. So would you rather have that or not being able to talk with them at all? I would honestly just not be able to talk to them if they didn't at least say something I was interested in. But yeah, I can kind of see both sides.
living their lives. And I love that. I love talking to an NPC I haven't seen before, especially when I realize they actually have a quest for me.
You make sure the lug tips you when it gets it.
That's a Radiant quest, and it's the same same kind of quest he was talking about earlier on a farm.
Sometimes when I play Skyrim, I feel like Simba talking to his dad. Everything the sun touches is a place where I can wander, discover, conquer, and plunder. See a mountain? Climb it. See a castle? Raid it. Prancing deer? Hunt it. Favorite NPC? Marry them. Shipwreck? Swim there. Nothing is for show. It's all there for you to explore, loot, and engage with. Speaking of choices, character creation is one of my favorite aspects of an RPG, and I instantly miss it in games like Red Dead
Not an RPG.
Redemption 2, Kingdom Come Deliverance, and The Witcher 3. I get why they have you play through a specific character, but for me, I'll always pick customizing my guy if given the option. I've probably spent more time in the Skyrim character creator than half the games in my Xbox library. There are endless options, and each one gives you a unique feel starting the game. This brute of an orc plays differently than my Dark Elf build, even though they're very similar technically, aside from a few starting stats, a perk, and a power. Skyrim lets you do more than just create disgusting looking characters. You can build giant houses with rooms for alchemy, enchanting, storage, and more. There are countless pieces of armor and clothing to mix and match. I mean, how sick do I look? You can adopt kids and turn stray dogs, hungry skeevers, spiders, and foxes into companions. You can get married and have your spouse run a business for you. You can buy different horses, turn yourself into a vampire, turn yourself into a werewolf, and so much more. All these small decisions and options lead to a character that feels fully fleshed out and really yours. No one else has made all these exact customizations you have. The difference between a massive, empty world and a vibrant, open world is the ability to interact. It doesn't matter how ambient and beautiful the mountains and forests and plains are if you can't engage in any meaningful way. In a word, Skyrim...
And that's the thing, isn't it? You can't really engage in a meaningful way in Skyrim because nothing of what you do has much of any consequence. I mean, they do, but only within like the quest. For the most part. And then people will kind of like recognize you mostly guards. Like, oh, hey, you defeated Mirok, or hey, Bard, or hey, you're the one who saved the fire festival. But ultimately, you don't really have that much of an, you don't really have that, you don't really, what am I trying to say? You don't really change the world that much. It all happens in a vacuum.
Skyrim gives you total freedom. It's one of the many qualities that bring us back to the game over and over again. By the way, thanks for watching this video. My channel is still new, so your support means a lot. I make videos about movies, shows, books, and video games. If you'd like to see more from me, you're more than welcome to subscribe or even turn on the notification bell. Whatever you decide to do, I really appreciate your time. Now let's get back to the video. There are some great game franchises out there, but I don't think any can match the lore of the Elder Scrolls games. Skyrim is the 5th installment in this series, and at this point, the rich in-game history is built into the DNA of these games. I don't think I can overstate how deep this goes. If you have a free 25 hours, Fudge Muppet has over 100 videos diving into specific topics of the lore. Imperial Knowledge has a bunch of great videos as well, including some for beginners if you're interested in learning more. It makes sense that these channels thrive when you look at the source material. With over 10 official games, multiple game guides, dozens of in-game books, countless developer interviews, and 2 novels, there's plenty of material to sift through.
Although a part of why they thrive is probably because the lore is so confusing.
I'm no lore buff, but I know there's a massive community of people who love diving into this world, not unlike the Middle-earth or Wheel of Time communities. So if you want to discuss the details of how individuals who have achieved Kim are able to become Amaranth and create their own dream reality, you'll have plenty of people who are more than willing on Reddit. Even if you don't care all that much about the history of Tamriel prior to Skyrim, the lore still enhances your gameplay. The region of Skyrim itself was conceived all the way back at the start of the first game, Elder Scrolls Arena. The whole Nordic vibe is a result of this lore. Alduin and his apocalyptic return is mentioned in Morrowind, so we can thank that tidbit for the main plot of the game. The different races are a result of an evolving larger storyline. They look and talk and act differently because of these origins. For example, the orcs are scattered throughout Skyrim in strongholds, but they don't have any cities here or in other regions and haven't managed to conquer significant land because, in short, their entire race is the result of a curse. Their violent nature often provoked the other races to band together against them to suppress their growth. Some of the game's best quest lines and content are iterations on the previous games. The Thieves Guild has appeared in every game since Daggerfall. Their Dark Brotherhood has been around since the start, though you couldn't join them until later on in the series. Morrowind introduced the ability to join the Blades. Daedric quests? We've had those since Daggerfall. Heck, even sweet rolls have been in the game since Arena.
Let me guess. Someone stole your sweet roll.
Yes.
That distinctly free feeling in Skyrim is something every Elder Scrolls...
That's something someone says to the fucking Dragonborn, right? A Dragon Slayer that everyone recognizes for some reason. Yeah, they make fun of them for coming up to a guard.
Game has worked to increase. In fact, every mechanic in this game is the result of iterating on the genre for well over a decade. Sure, not every game gets better in every aspect, but there's no denying that Skyrim is the result of a studio with strong ARPG DNA working year after year to make great games. The experience of the studio, the vast lore, and the successful iterations of its predecessors all make Skyrim immeasurably better. I can't imagine a new studio or even an experienced studio making a new franchise, creating something as intricate, deep, and whole as Skyrim. In my opinion, mods get too much credit for Skyrim's success. I've played hundreds of hours on the PC, Xbox 360, Xbox One, and Xbox Series X vanilla versions, and I never felt like the game was missing anything. Mods help the game stay fresh and can really enhance the player's experience, but they aren't by any means a necessity. If you are into that sort of thing, Bethesda has done a good job of making sure that mods are easy to access, even on consoles. A lot of them add better lighting, more customization options, texture variations, improved animation.
I really like how the slow time shout doesn't slow down their speaking lines. That makes sense.
Better UI and other visual changes, or audio changes. My personal favorite is the Project Pew mod.
I didn't know about that one. Oh, that's awesome.
Might be important, but what really interests me are mods that add quest lines or gameplay options. Ever wondered what it would be like to start Skyrim as something other than a prisoner? Alternate Start lets you pick from a bunch of different options to begin your game, like being a hunter or getting attacked and left for dead. If you want an in-depth quest where you escort a caravan of Khajiit back to their homeland, give Moonpath to Elsewhere a shot. You can add weapons and armor with dozens of different mods, or rebuild Helgen with the fully voiced Helgen Reborn mod. There are countless mods that add hundreds of hours of brand new content to the game. If you're worried about the quality of this content, just look at the Forgotten City mod. It won awards for its writing, and eventually got turned into its own indie game. If that doesn't speak to the quality of many of these mods, I'm not sure what will. There are a ton of channels and blogs that dive really deep into mods, but I'm not going to get into it here. I do think it was worth mentioning. The vibrant modding community has really helped this game, and many mods add that extra little cherry on top. Blackreach, the Headless Horseman, ants crawling along tree stumps, and little critters like butterflies. What do these all have in common? They're additions to Skyrim that weren't in the original schedule, created by passionate devs who just wanted to give the game a little extra life. According to Joel Burgess, who we heard from earlier, less than 100 people worked on Skyrim. For perspective, roughly 500 people worked on Cyberpunk, and Breath of the Wild had around 300 people at its peak. It's clear from interviews that the Elder Scrolls V devs loved what they did and who they got to do it with. They genuinely cared about this project, competed to make each other better, gave it their all, and took it upon themselves to make the experience as immersive as possible for every player.
It was never about like what I drew or what I modeled or what I added. It was always about like, what can we give to the player? What can we do collectively to just make this better than it was going to be with each one of our additional steps on there?
The ants? You can thank Mark Tier for that. No one asked him to do it, and when he pitched it in a meeting after already having completed the work, the reception was meh, but listen to how he describes his thought process.
You have like a very, very interested and participatory audience, and they'll find your thing that you love, that you put in, and they'll make something of it and enjoy it. This is just, tickling an itch for me, but I bet you someone else will like this.
Jonah Loeb, a character artist who just wanted the world to feel alive and full of promise, pushed the idea of a critter system until developer Sean Simoneau, I know I said that wrong, but I promise I practiced first, until he decided to create it as a side project. It's because of these two taking initiative that the game has fireflies and butterflies and moths and other little critters that help our subconscious connect to the game. And what about Blackreach?
Huh,
a whole
really?
area of the world, a fan favorite.
So they didn't want to include it to begin with? Sounds like Bethesda.
At that wouldn't exist without Nate Perkypile and Joe Burgess, quote, sneaking it in.
I mean, a lot of people know about it now, but we did effectively sneak it in.
Then there's my personal favorite, the Headless Horseman. Justin Schramm created a character who spawns randomly in the world and then rides at full speed to Hamvir's Rest, his gravesite. I love seeing the smile on this guy's face as he describes his creation.
It's a simple little dumb thing, but I'm so proud of it.
There are so many little pieces of the game.
Okay, but then what? What happens after that? Maybe I should investigate it. Investigate the Headless Horseman?
By countless passionate developers. The eventual cumulative effect of everyone who worked on this game giving it their best effort to add just a little extra to the game is one that feels whole, lived in, beautiful even. One of my favorite things on YouTube is a 10-hour-long Skyrim ambience video that I throw on in the background while I'm at work. It makes the day better to have that music going, to see the calming Skyrim night sky shining at me while I write code. Every so often, I'll scroll through the comments. You have people who are homesick for a place they've never been, people like me who have never really found a game to match this, and others who just miss simpler times. As I mentioned before, life is much more complicated now for just about everyone than it was 10 years ago. It's challenging to deal with bills and car maintenance fees and debt and aging parents and health problems and financial downturn, and all of these factors make it harder to find time to relax. Sometimes when we do have time, it's a challenge to just let go. For years, Skyrim has been the perfect way for me to do exactly that. I come in knowing that I'm going to enter a fantasy world where I can do anything and be anyone. Usually that anyone is just a guy wandering the tundra.
When people say you can do anything and be anyone in regards to Skyrim, what do they mean? Because it's not a very good description of the game. They kind of railroad you into a certain path. And even then, you don't really have much of a choice in all the quests. So, what do they mean when they claim that you can be anything, do anything? Because, well, that's basically Dungeons and Dragons. And even there, you can't be anything or do anything. Well, you kind of can, but there are limits. But with Skyrim, it's a much more... It's not really that expansive in terms of story, in terms of mechanics. Like, they have a bard's college, for God's sake, and you can't even play a fucking instrument. The bard college sends you out into dungeons to fight stuff. You know, bards. An aspiring bard being sent to a fucking grave full of walking dead people with axes to like recover some shit. When bards are, you know, people who sing, tell stories, play instruments, and not usually fighters. And that's some of the problem with Skyrim. It doesn't matter what you want to roleplay as. It doesn't matter if you want to try to talk to people. They will attack you on sight. And even if you were to use a calm spell on them, you can't really talk. They just stop attacking you for 60 seconds and then they'll go right back to trying to kill you. So there's no reasoning. And like even Morrowind and Oblivion, I'm pretty sure, had quests where you could just talk your way out of them instead of having to fight. In fact, I'm sure Morrowind had that, but in Skyrim, no. Like, even trying to make people fight you by choosing the wrong options doesn't work in instances where it's not supposed to work. So it's basically, you're just basically being railroaded. If the game wants you to fight, you have to fight. And if the game doesn't want you to fight, you don't have to. For the most part, I'm sure there are certain quests where this doesn't apply, right? There always are. Mostly because all the quests don't have like one single designer, but are a lot of people who each make their own quests. Which is also part of the reason why none of these quests seem like they matter, because they don't interlink or have anything with each other to do for the most part. But yeah, I'm still not sure what people mean by you can do anything, you can be anyone, because it's just not true.
Looking at the sky and trees.
It's the least true in Skyrim than in any of the other games, I'm pretty sure.
Stumbling across little shacks or small quests to help NPCs. It's a place where I can unwind, where I bring no expectations except that it's going to be fun, and that the game will bring something new and exciting if only I give it a little time. If you go to the same place over and over to relax, and you find the calmness, or the adventure, or excitement, or exploration you're looking for, it becomes easier and easier to find, because you've already gone down that neural pathway dozens of times before. With limitless freedom, the unending content, rich lore, countless quality mods, and a thoughtfully crafted world, things stay fresh for years. If the game starts to feel stale, you can just start over again with a new build. Worst comes to worst, you can give it a break for a few months, or years.
You don't even really have to start over again. You can just go start doing magic.
But you'll be back, because when we play this game, we enter a certain state of mind, one of expectation, filled with memories, knowing that this game, all these years later, still has more to offer. To answer my earlier question, I haven't been able to find another game I enjoy as much as Skyrim because it's a one-of-a-kind game that perfectly aligns with my preferences. You could argue that Red Dead Redemption 2 and The Witcher 3 do some of the things I mentioned in this video even better than Skyrim, but I'll never like those games as much because of my personal taste. All of Skyrim's mechanics and lore and world and stories combine to make a game that is objectively good, that I subjectively think is the great...
You can't say that. You can't say that it's objectively good. Not with games, not with any game.
This game of all time. If you're still watching, this probably resonates with you. Luckily for us, the game isn't going anywhere, and we can always hope that we'll still be alive in 2088 when The Elder Scrolls 6 comes out. Until then, I'll just be here, playing Skyrim.
That's a edit, I'm pretty sure. Doesn't feel like the image moves which is weird because that's really easy to do, but whatever. Hey, that's a cool edit, I guess.
Hey, you. You're finally awake. You were trying to cross the border, right? Walked right into that Imperial ambush. Same as us.
Alright. I think that was an okay video. I mean, it certainly gave me a lot of stuff to talk about for its relative short size. It doesn't get better than Skyrim. Oh, it really does. It does easily get better than Skyrim, but a narrative critique of Elder Scrolls V Skyrim Duke of Wales.
Okay, let's.
Huh. I should. Ooh. Okay, I should add this to the list. This is a long one. Maybe I'll just watch it on my own time. But this seems like a video. Especially since it kind of seems like it's talking about the story. Duke of Wales. So not the animal whale, but the place, I guess.
True story, Harrison.
Not shorts. I meant to press the log. Alright, do I actually have time for this last video? It's an hour long. Let's see. This does have parts, doesn't it? Intro, Skyrim's production, launch day. Okay, stuff which I'm all really uninterested in, honestly. I think I've seen enough of Skyrim's marketing. Quests and factions, dungeons and enemies, combat skills and perks, DLCs, soundtrack, modding, final thoughts. Okay, you know what? Let's watch the intro. And we're gonna skip that.
For 4 hours straight, I looked over at my clock, realizing it was 12 in the morning, and I had to get ready for bed, as it was far past my bedtime. And so, I did just that. I did this for about 3 weeks or so, and every night before falling asleep, I was giddy with excitement to wake up and do it all over again. Unfortunately, I was too young to fully understand at the time what I was witnessing. A video game that was so anticipated, it sold 3.5 million copies within the first 48 hours of release. Now, that may not sound...
I mean, they did good marketing this game.
All too impressive in this day and age. Mind you, this was during 2011. The gaming industry hadn't become the mega entertainment industry it is today. Back then, video games weren't created for the sake of making money and being shit out every year just for a quick buck. They were handcrafted with heart and soul, and most importantly, made with a vision in mind. Of course,
dude, that's such bullshit. There were definitely games being just thrown out there. I mean, come on. The Wii's fucking shovelware library.
There are a handful of exceptions. Sure, Skyrim gets hate now, but back in 2011...
This is just like, the old days were so much better.
This video game was a work of...
It does have a point. I mean, AAA games and big studios are really risk-averse. And has become increasingly so over the years. But there still are games that are made with love and care and soul. Even if most of them are indies.
Art, and absolutely groundbreaking. Truly one of the greatest video games that had ever been created at that time. I don't think people really comprehend what kind of impact this single game had on the gaming industry as a whole. Skyrim set the bar so high in the RPG genre, in fact, even in 2023.
Yeah, it's not an RPG.
Games are still being compared to it today. And even still, it's difficult for current generation games to live up to the expectations Skyrim set in stone almost 12 years ago. Of course, Skyrim isn't perfect, however. No video game is. but there's a reason it's one of the most played video games of all time, and is still played today by a highly active community. There are only a few select games that have achieved this legendary status, and are loved and respected universally by everyone to the point where they are still talked about to this very day. And that is exactly why we are here today.
Notice how these are mostly games from the 2000s.
By a highly active community. There are only a few select games that have achieved this legendary status, and are loved and respected universally.
Even like 2010 and up. I mean, you could have looked for older games if you wanted to, because there definitely are older games that are still, you know, respected, talked about.
By everyone to the point where they're still
even now
about to this very day. And that is exactly why we are here today. I'm going to take a crack at deconstructing this behemoth of a video game and lay all the pieces out on display for us to discern together. This will not be an easy task, but by the end of this video, you will have a deeper understanding of the talent that Bethesda Game Studios used in the creation of Skyrim. And one last thing, I will be comparing Skyrim to its predecessors mostly, as I feel it makes the most sense to do so, considering it exists in the same series and universe. You'll see later in the video, I'll begin comparing them heavily, as I feel each game did something far better than one another. So without further ado, let's begin.
Let's skip to World and Exploration.
Arguably the most important aspect of an Elder Scrolls game is the world in which you play in. It's no secret that Bethesda Game Studios is one of the most talented world designers in the gaming industry. Some even believe the world is the true main character of the series, and everything else revolves around it. But with the advancements in technology compared to the earlier entries, it's undeniable that Skyrim may have one of the most immersive virtual worlds of our generation.
Bullshit.
The scenery and breathtaking vistas, mixed with Jeremy Soul's musical scores, can be downright hypnotic at times. Skyrim does this marvelous job at sucking you in and enveloping you in its world. One moment, you'll be following a quest marker, then the next you'll be picking flowers and sightseeing from a cliff. Or perhaps you notice a dungeon with a few bandits camped outside, and out of curiosity, you go and investigate the scene, only to find yourself battling hordes of Draugr in an all-new quest line you didn't even know existed just a few moments ago. Fundamentally, this is what the Elder Scrolls is all about. And undoubtedly, Bethesda is aware of this. As with each new entry, they've only improved upon this concept, and have only become more skillful at doing so. Hell, even in Fallout 76, the Appalachian Mountains were undeniably outstanding to look at. Between the improved ambient noises of simply hearing a breeze flow through grass, or a Nirnroot pulsating with its ominous aura, whilst simultaneously hearing water run through a stream next to it. It goes the same with walking through a shopping district and hearing the townspeople chatter about what produce they would like to purchase, while smoke from braziers climb over the walls of the city. All of this is in an effort for you to be completely immersed in this fantasy world.
I mean, he has a point, but then the entire fucking thing breaks when someone just teleports in from out of nowhere.
And as our Lord and Savior Todd Howard would say,
all of this just works. It's not, I'm not kidding.
No, that's just dumb. None of it works. I mean, most of it works, but like, it's so noticeable when something doesn't work.
Aside, it really is true, and more so when it comes to Skyrim. No longer will you be wasting your time trying to backtrack your way out of a dungeon like in the older games. Old school fans may argue this point, saying it makes the dungeons feel like amusement park rides. But I disagree. For me, it's like dying to a boss in Dark Souls, than having to run all the way.
How can you make the argument that the world feels real and immersive when a natural cave has like just a way out and no side paths, by the way? Absolutely no paths to the side that you can explore. Just a way out that's just slightly hidden from sight and impossible to get up to. at the end of the dungeon or the cave. You can't argue that those two belong.
Way back for the battle to commence again. Plainly put, it's insufferable. Skyrim also upgraded the amount of locations and treasures to discover while on your journeys, making exploration far more engaging. I say upgraded because it was likely due to hardware limitations at the time. The coolest part about this to me is, even after 4,500 hours of gameplay, I'm still somehow discovering fascinating details and loot in places I never knew about. That there, my friends, is a sign of a well-crafted open-world RPG. There is a tremendous amount of replay value. This is another reason why Skyrim is so loved. However, I thought I'd mention, as great as the gameplay loop truly is, there are a few major problems. One being that the currency, or otherwise known as gold septims, has very little meaning in Skyrim. By the time you're level 20, you can pretty much afford anything you'd like to have. Aside from buying all the houses all at once, there isn't anything in the game you need a large sum of money for. In contrast to Oblivion, there were unique enchanted items that some merchants would sell for a large price. Granted, not all worth buying, but some definitely were. It's just another thing to potentially spend your gold on, instead of having...
That costs like less than the Warhammer you showed off. But like, it's kind of irrelevant when you don't have to buy anything really to just play the game normally.
20 grand in your pocket at any given moment. And don't get me started on the Prowler's Profit perk you get from completing the Stones of Baron Zaya quests. It just straight up breaks the damn game. You'll be drowning in gems to sell to merchants. And if you sell the items with the fast travel meta, you can just fast travel in a rotation all around Skyrim to sell your gems, if somehow you do manage to become broke. This meta will fix your problem in about 10 minutes, moving at a snail's pace. And this brings us to the NPCs. Now, before I speak about the NPCs, there is one element we all need to understand before moving on. This game is approaching 12 years old, and I've played some great open world games during these 12 years. So it would be naive to compare it to games that are far younger. To some of you, it's almost as if I just told you the sky is blue. But unfortunately, I've seen people undermine Skyrim's greatness while comparing it to games that are much newer. At face value, all NPCs are highly immersive. They wake up, eat, work, sit around, then sleep. Of course, others deviate from this pattern, but in simplistic terms, this is essentially what most of them do. This is otherwise known as Radiant AI, which is a technology firstly developed by, you guessed it, Bethesda Softworks. To briefly summarize what Radiant AI actually means, I'm going to play a clip for you.
Yeah, pretty much.
Oh my goodness. Excuse me, are you all right? By the divines. This person's dead.
Yep.
Basically, NPCs
pretty much
react to whatever is around them in numerous ways. Some good.
Wait, was that supposed to be a good example or a bad example?
And some really bad. Radiant AI was first developed for Oblivion, then later expanded on in Fallout 3, then Skyrim, and of course afterwards, Fallout 4. Unfortunately for Oblivion, however, Radiant AI was disastrous in test demos because all the NPCs would start killing each other. It would go something like this. A thief would steal from an NPC. NPC would cause a commotion. Guard would notice said commotion. Therefore, he would track down the thief, then proceed to
Actually, you know what? It's still like that in Skyrim. Like, a guard will kill someone and they're like, oh my god, are you... I mean, it's not fixed.
Front the thief. And since Bethesda didn't add...
Or like something similar. Maybe not the exact same course of events, but something extremely similar.
For NPCs to pay bounties, there would be no other option besides killing said thief. So obviously, this got quite out of hand for Bethesda. Nonetheless, this still led to some highly comedic moments in Oblivion. But how does this tie into Skyrim, though? Well, you see, Radiant AI is still very much a thing in Skyrim, besides a few glaring problems that were somehow not fixed. And armed with this knowledge I just bestowed upon you, you probably realize the issues as well. An easy issue to pick apart would be when walking past NPCs in any town or village in Skyrim, they will almost always, without fail, either start spilling their life story
yes.
or just trauma dump
Speak, King.
information on you you've probably heard in the last week. The obvious issue is, nobody in their right mind would do this to a complete stranger. And this happens all the time throughout a Skyrim playthrough, and can be very immersion breaking.
Yes. Thank you.
Exactly how these infamous memes were spawned in the first place.
I used to be an adventurer like you. Then I took an arrow in the knee.
I should reiterate though, I do personally think Radiant AI fits the Elder Scrolls series, although I respect opposing arguments against it. Probably the strongest argument I've seen is the fact it takes lots of tedious work to script out all these NPCs, consequently wasting valuable time that could be better spent elsewhere. For example, in The Witcher 3, there are a vast amount of NPCs, but they aren't very intricate. They pretty much only serve the purpose of populating cities and creating the illusion of a bustling city. And this isn't a bad thing by any stretch of the imagination.
Honestly, this is so much better. Because you know where to find the NPCs. They're not just walking about randomly. Or, well, they're not walking about randomly in Skyrim, but you get the gist of it.
That's because it works. Moreover, this is something Bethesda struggles to accomplish, since the developers meticulously design every single NPC. Both design philosophies have their pros and cons. So the real question is, should Bethesda take this approach? Honestly, I'm open to both sides, and I don't really know what the...
I mean, ultimately, the player doesn't really notice it anyway until an NPC is gone and can't be found. Right? And again, I'm gonna say it again. Majora's Mask, although lesser in scope, did this so much better.
The best route would be to take here. Nonetheless, fixing Skyrim's most common Radiant AI issues would be a simple fix in my opinion. Just shut the NPCs up every now and then. Better yet, if an NPC gets to know you, then they tell you how their daughter was brutally tortured, then murdered by a group of bandits, rather than just laying all the information on a complete stranger.
But then again, the problem arises of how are you going to be made aware of the quests these people have if they are not just shouting at you constantly. That's another problem Bethesda has with their NPCs. They don't know how to properly convey that someone wants you to do something without having them shout at you. And while I can respect the decision not to have like this giant exclamation mark above their head, it also, you know, brings about problems like that.
As I see it, the main storyline in Skyrim has aged the worst out of the 3 Elder Scrolls games.
Thank you.
While Skyrim's main quest line isn't bad by any measure, it does not
wrong
hold a candle to Morrowind and Oblivion. Although Morrowind had minimal dialogue, I still found it to be quite engaging.
What do you mean minimal? Dialogue is not just spoken. Dialogue is also written. You do know that, right?
It was notably rewarding after defeating Dagoth because all of the NPCs treated you differently afterwards after realizing you were the Nerevarine. I find Oblivion's storyline to be far more impactful than Skyrim's, once more because of the characters you get to know along the way. Martin Septim is a brilliantly written character if you ask me, and by the end when he sacrifices himself to save Tamriel, it hurts that much more. Sadly, Skyrim's story didn't leave that much of an impact on me. Aside from Parthenax, I didn't find any of the characters to be distinctly interesting. As a matter of fact, I found a few to be quite aggravating, with no real payoff, particularly Delphine. Sometimes it's okay to write a character to be irritating.
Everyone hates Delphine, and with good reason too, I guess I should add.
Upon first meeting them. Then once you get to know them, they begin to grow on you. Arya from the Mass Effect games is a perfect example of this. I found Delphine to always act like an asswipe, regardless of the situation. Admittedly, she's highly intelligent, as intended by the writers, and her character's writing reflects that. However, I never felt any real friendships.
Also, how the hell do they even learn about Parthenax? Whatever, I can never manage to pronounce that name correctly. How did they even learn about him?
Blossom throughout the storyline. Truthfully, aside from my very first playthrough, every new playthrough I've always dreaded questing through the main campaign because of this issue. There's nothing that is satisfying that keeps me hooked. But with 4,500 hours of time clocked into the game, maybe that's to be expected. But the story in my eyes simply isn't cut from the same cloth previous entries were. All in all though, I find the main quest line to be quite anticlimactic. The final battle wasn't nearly as bombastic as it should have been. Nevertheless, after defeating Alduin, there isn't any world-altering changes to make it seem like you just saved the world from the World Eater. The game just kinda moves on. In this aspect, I feel the other games handle this in a much better fashion. Oblivion's way to display the impact you left on the world was to show you all the Oblivion gates collapsing after Martin Septim faced off against Mehrunes Dagon and defeated him after breaking the Amulet of Kings and transforming into Akatosh himself. And as a nice cherry on top, Martin left behind the Avatar of Akatosh statue that you can always visit after completing the main story. Morrowind's unique way of showing the importance of your actions after completing the main quest line is by shifting the way almost all NPCs interact with the player. Rather than disregarding the player, they will begin to treat you with major significance after learning you are the Nerevarine. In Skyrim, none of this really happens, besides maybe a few...
Well, with Morrowind, it's like the least amount of effort too. But there's also the sleepers who awaken, I guess they fall back asleep. But that's also like kind of a nod to the entire main quest thing.
Guards lending you praise, and Parthenax giving you an honorable speech. Unfortunately, this is one of Skyrim's weaker points compared to games prior. The way factions work in Skyrim is another major gripe I have. Then after I got a little older, I began playing the originals. And boy is there a major difference. I'm not really sure what exactly went wrong here. I wouldn't exactly call it a catastrophe, but it's damn near close. In fear of making this segment unnecessarily long, I'll give you the main issues with all of Skyrim's factions. Before all else, it's essential I get one thing out of the way. A problem that is so bad in fact, it makes Skyrim look elementary. There are no restrictions on what factions you can join whatsoever, despite player history. I made the example earlier in the video of murdering a whole village and still being able to march all the way to Solitude, the capital of Skyrim, and join the Imperial Legion. This is unacceptably immersion breaking. This is a 12-year-old video game, and it would have taken lots of hands on deck to script all the nuances of the situations the player may cause in the environment. It's likely Bethesda was aware of this problem, but after weighing the pros and cons of not fixing this, they decided to allocate resources to the contrary instead. However, admittedly, this is likely a factor of Skyrim's success. Being able to play as a psychotic Dark Brotherhood assassin while simultaneously being labeled as the hero of Skyrim puts far less restrictions on the player without...
But like none of the other games really did that though, did they?
Having to start a new character all over again, just to roleplay as the bad or good guy. I realize this and understand the concept greatly. Despite that, I feel it would do the next Elder Scrolls game wonders if they implemented some sort of mild restrictions, such as having to prove yourself to the townspeople, or even proving yourself to the bad guys if you do too many good deeds for the townspeople. This was just a fast, digestible example, obviously, but hopefully it got the point across. This scenario could be applicable to just about any faction, i.e. Dark Brotherhood or an Honorable Fighters Guild, etc. Even with this aside, we still aren't done with the issues Skyrim has in terms of writing. Aside from the Dawnguard questline, which I find personally to be one of the most fulfilling factions in the series, every single one of Skyrim's factions are clearly inferior in terms of story writing when in comparison to Morrowind and Oblivion. Firstly, let's get the Dawnguard factions out of the way. I think they are amazingly well written, and I'll say Serana is definitely a contender for best characters in all of Elder Scrolls.
You're just saying that because you want to fuck her.
Friendship you form with her is next to none with any of the characters in Skyrim. It's almost a quality as high as friendships in the Mass Effect series. Unfortunately for the player, however, Serana isn't marryable. Without
I was right.
Action out much longer. Up front, I'll say all of the writing for the rest of the factions in Skyrim is absolutely terrible. Morrowinds were pretty good from what I remember, but in Oblivion, the writing was on a whole other level. The characters, the plot, the build-up, and all the twists and turns along the way were absolutely magical. It really felt like you were climbing the ranks in the guilds, whether you were a novice spellcaster or a rookie assassin. The progression felt really organic. Contrarily, Skyrim's writing is lackluster at best and unfulfilling at worst, not to mention a few plot holes we won't bother getting into. In Skyrim, half half of the time you don't even feel like a student at the College of Winterhold, or a thief in the Thieves Guild, because you're just allowed to slaughter endless bandits in the Thieves Guild, which contradicts their code. Even Vex says,
When a client needs us to eliminate another, we don't operate like the Dark Brotherhood. We find alternate means to get them out of the way.
Meanwhile, bandits aren't very much different from Thieves Guild members. Both groups are pretty much just thugs, so this logic doesn't make much sense to me. Oblivion's Thieves Guild had this issue
No, but like, do you specifically do that as part of the Thieves Guild? I don't think you do. I should probably play through that next.
under much more control by focusing more on the thieving aspect and being sneaky. Also, while being a member of the college, you never truly feel like a student mage trying to learn magic, when you hardly ever have to cast a spell. It's more akin to feeling like an errand boy slaughtering endless Draugr. If I'm going to be completely truthful with you though, Oblivion struggled with this as well. But at least the storyline was more well written, making it less painful to quest through. Equally annoying as the College of Winterhold issues is that being a blade is much more meaningful in Oblivion, whereas in Skyrim it requires you to kill one of the few most memorable characters, Parthenax. I can't remember the last time I went this route in a playthrough. It was, and still is, infuriating that there isn't an option to resolve this issue by other means. Or hell, even killing Esbern and Delphine would have been fine by me.
I mean, you fucking already proved yourself to them when you took down Alduin, right? I mean, it's so weird that they don't want to speak to you before you kill Parthenax.
I do like Esbern though, so thankfully there are mods to fix this issue, but it seems like this section of the Blade's quest line was unfinished. It just seems blatant and brash, especially when there is no option to remove the Parthenax quest from your quest log by siding with the Greybeards instead of the Blades. Furthermore, the end section of the Blade's quest line just screams unfinished, and that's unfortunate considering it's attached to some of the most important characters in all of Skyrim. Basically, to summarize, every faction that Skyrim has, Oblivion does better tenfold. I do give credit to Skyrim's Dark Brotherhood questline, however, as it isn't all that bad. I found the ending to be quite dramatic in a good way. Assassinating Tamriel's Emperor was a very bold move by the writers. Side quests in Skyrim tend to be a hit and miss on most occasions, and most of the community would likely agree with this statement. Some quests in Skyrim are some of the best the series has to offer, while other quests are just kind of lame, requiring you to clear out a dungeon full of Draugr to either retrieve an item or save somebody. I don't want to be too harsh on Skyrim's quest, because I genuinely enjoy most of them, but I understand where some people are coming from when they say Skyrim is too repetitive. The Thieves Guild Restoration quest line is a prime example of this, requiring the—
Bro, is this your life, live streaming a 10-year-old game on a Saturday for nobody? Feels bad, man. Well, it's not for nobody. I'm doing it for mostly myself, honestly. Also, I used to have someone viewing this. I usually do have people here, but seems just like a slow Saturday, I guess. But yeah, I'm doing this mostly for myself for research purposes. So might as well stream it, right?
The player to complete meagerly tasks that the game randomly generates for you. Undoubtedly, this is the game's biggest weakness with quest design. It makes the player feel they have no impact in the world. Therefore, auto-generated quests like this, and the ones in the Dark Brotherhood, become very stale, very fast. On the other hand, I find most of Skyrim's side quests to be great. Some lead you through very exciting twists and turns, and you get to uncover some lost secrets while delving deeper into Skyrim's lore. One of Skyrim's strongest points in terms of quests would definitely be the Daedric quest, hands down. At least, this is the case for me. Each quest has a meaning behind them, and displays the characteristics and personality traits of each Daedric prince very well. That's not to say the games prior didn't, I just think Skyrim managed to do it better. Most of the Daedric quests still leave an impact on me to this day. I find them to be highly memorable in most cases.
I guess the Daedric quests are kind of just like the most interesting because they deal with just gods. I mean, it's hard to find something more interesting, right? Because they can just do whatever. Even if the fucking Sheogorath quest was a dud this time around. I liked it better when he summoned flaming dogs raining from the sky. That was fun.
However, with all that said, if you were to ask me which Elder Scrolls game had the best quest overall, I would have to say Oblivion wins. Skyrim's side quests are fine, but Oblivion consistently had very well written side quests, whereas Skyrim's was far more sporadic. I should say, in my opinion, definitively, Oblivion wins in quest design.
Is that RuneScape music?
One of the Elder Scrolls series' biggest improvements during the production of Skyrim, from an objective standpoint, would be the level design in each and every dungeon or cave. They no longer require you to waste hours overall trying to backtrack your way through a dungeon just to exit and get on with your life. I say hours because picture how much time you've wasted overall backtracking your way out of caves and dungeons during a 200-hour playthrough of Oblivion. I would confidently say it's at least in the ballpark of 2 to 8 hours. This is, of course, if you do a lot of exploring, which is exactly what the Elder Scrolls' main focus is, exploring. So I would surmise there is a high chance you did just that. Put plainly, you've wasted a lot of your time. Fortunately in Skyrim, this problem has almost completely been eradicated from its gameplay loop, by almost always having a shortcut to the...
That's so fucking stupid. How can you be exploring a goddamn dungeon that just pushes you through it, like straight through it without any side paths or anything? You're not exploring, you're walking through a cave. If you're exploring something, you usually just like kind of look around nooks and crannies, but in Skyrim there's nothing to look for. You just go through the dungeon and kill some enemies that come running at you for no reason, even if like they're better off trying to talk to you and reason. But no, there's no exploring to be done except in the overworld mostly, and the fucking the end of the dungeon looping back into the start just does not make sense for a natural cave. Maybe for something man-made, but
the exit. As I hinted at before, some hardcore fans argue this is a detriment to the game, claiming it breaks immersion by always having a quick and easy way out, right next to the main throne room, where the leader was supposed to be protected, more or less making it resemble an amusement park ride, rather than a heavily guarded tomb. I do not think this is the case, however. Firstly, this argument doesn't hold very much weight, when considering the player themselves are a goddamn walking armory, being able to carry 300 pounds worth of weapons and armor, without a single weapon or piece of armor being visible. People may even argue this feature as well, and my response to that would be to tell you straightforwardly, your opinion is misguided. You are looking for an Elder Scrolls game. At no point has this feature ever been missing in the DNA of an Elder Scrolls game. Back to my main point with all...
I don't think that's the point, but I also don't think it's a problem. I mean, it's a game, right?
All of this, if you are a developer of an open world RPG, one of the main goals is to immerse the player as much as possible. But this immersion shouldn't cross over the threshold of real life immersion. Or in other words, it shouldn't suck as much ass as in real life while also being immersive enough for it to be believable. Having no shortcut exits in dungeons does not bring anything new to the play to worthwhile, when there are other more important issues with Skyrim that obviously need attention. For those of you that are much more hardcore with your Elder Scrolls games, understand this. I'm on your side, truly, but I think our critiquing efforts would be far better spent elsewhere, especially considering this is one of the main contributing factors to Skyrim's success, that being it's greatly enhancing the ease of use throughout the dungeons of Skyrim, making it more acceptable to a casual audience, which to you may be a problem in and of itself because you fear Bethesda may continue dumbing down RPG elements in an attempt to draw in more players. But I think there needs to be a compromise between casual gamers and hardcore RPG players. Furthermore, for this argument, I can only state...
Well, yes, it does have a point. If you want to reach a broader audience, then you can't have super complex RPG elements. Like, for example, in... Well, okay. Morrowind didn't have super complex RPG elements either, but it had reading, which most people obviously don't like to do. But yeah, I don't think Skyrim is an RPG anymore. It's just an action-adventure game. There's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with liking that. But people shouldn't fool themselves into thinking this is an RPG.
state my opinion based on anecdotal evidence, as this is all I have to go off of. Out of thousands of hours of playtime, I just simply did not experience any immersion-breaking shortcut exits throughout Skyrim's dungeons. I can, however, say I remember experiencing great frustration when trying to find my way out of dungeons in Morrowind and Oblivion, although it never deterred me from finishing the games or exploring because, well, I love the Elder Scrolls. This aside, though, I still had loads of fun role-playing in each of these games, so even if I wasn't an Elder Scrolls nerd, I would have played regardless. After loads of playtime with each title, I will confidently say—
Yeah, look at how hard it is to get out of this dungeon right here. Man, I'm really lost right now. Wow.
Skyrim's dungeon design is the best by far, and it's not even debatable. From the aesthetics, puzzles, booby traps—
You don't get to say that. You don't get to call the puzzles good. You don't get to call the puzzles anything but horrible and insulting to the player, because that's all they are.
To the quests tied to them. Unsurprisingly, there are a few minor flaws I've had to face over the course of 4,500 hours of game time. After a while, they do become pretty repetitive, in particular, the Nordic dungeons. An Elder Scrolls game taking place in the province of Skyrim, which is the homeland of the Nords. Having a surplus of Nordic burial sites and dungeons is really unsurprising. So naturally, it makes sense for Bethesda to try and alleviate this with adding different variations of caves and dungeons. Thankfully, I believe they did a decent job by adding Dwemer ruins and different variations of caverns. This still doesn't change the fact that there are still a ton of Nordic ruins that have slight variations of puzzles, which ultimately aren't challenging at the end of the day and even become stale. Eventually, this will lead you to believe that all Nordic dungeons will bore you, because you can already predict what's about to happen a mile away. You enter a Nordic crypt and fight your way through hordes of Draugr, then unlock the main throne room, only to fight a big-ass tanky Draugr boy. This is overly simplified, but in essence, not very far off. And maybe you are thinking, of course my experience is like this. I've played the game so much, and you could very well be correct. It's only in recent years that this opinion has started to slowly grow on me. Maybe it's because I've gotten older and have thousands of hours of playtime. It could also be that I've played newer games with much more variety and have applied this mindset to a decade-old game. Who really knows? But what I do know, this isn't a major issue at the end of the day. I still play Skyrim now and again and have a blast. Something—
I mean, that's just Stockholm Syndrome kicking in.
That's greatly aided and worsened this problem is the enemy variety. There are plenty of different wild animals and creatures out in the wilderness, and this extends into the caves and caverns of Skyrim, which is great, but in Nordic dungeons, it's by and large mostly Draugr, which herein lies our problem. While it's great having lots of wildlife to battle in different caves, and coupled with this, it's mixed with bandits every now and again. In Nordic dungeons, it's only Draugr. I literally do not remember any other enemy-varying dungeon.
Aren't those skeletons, though?
Besides Mount Kilcreath and the Break of Dawn Daedric quests, where you fight corrupted skeletons, and the other dungeon being Skaldothin, which has a very unique level design, combining hordes of dragons with hordes of Draugr, which hasn't been applied to any
Damn it, I need to leave soon.
That I have grown tired of.
Well, we'll watch until the next part, and then we're done.
Time I play through them, it makes me roll my eyes and almost puts me to sleep. These are also attached to quests, which is an entirely different problem that we've already covered. I'm going to name these dungeons and quests off the top of my head, so watch and listen carefully, because I'm sure most of you will memorize at least one of these. Mount Kilcreath, quest name, The Break of Dawn. Full Gunther, Sarthal, and Jeremy's Hall, all attached to the Forbidden Legend quests. And lastly, Ustengrav, quest name, The Horn of Jurgen Windcaller, which is a mandatory quest to continue the main storyline to defeat Alduin. These are my top most hated dungeons. I try to avoid these for as long as possible because of how badly I hate them. In my opinion, they are the most tiring, monotonous, irritating quests and dungeons in the entirety of the game. On the plus side,
what a trap.
Add dragons to the Elder Scrolls, which did shake things up in a good way, sort of keeping you on the edge of your seat whenever one shows up, making things more difficult to predict. They are a nice little cherry on top of the enemy variety.
Alright, good so far, but I really need to go right now. I have somewhere to be. I thought we'd get to watch the entire video, but apparently not. Although I don't think there's that much left that's interesting. Just have some takes here and there, but yeah. Why Skyrim is a masterpiece. Haven't actually written down anything he said. But anyways, yeah. Thanks everyone for stopping by, watching, whatever. And yeah. Maybe a new stream next weekend. We'll see. Goodbye.